Evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are warmly welcome you, all of you, for the Budget Highlights 2026 organized by the National Premium Management Accounting Body of Sri Lanka, CMA Sri Lanka, on the theme of budget and taxation proposals and its impact on economy, business, and society. To start these proceedings, I would like to welcome Professor Lakshmana Vatavala, founder and president of CMA Sri Lanka, to do the welcome and opening remarks. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Gajendran. Good afternoon to all of you. I must especially thank our presenters and the panelists who had kindly agreed to spend a little time with us and be present at this budget seminar. And all participants, I know some of them are still logging in. We had close to 1,000 registrations, but I'm sure at least about 500, 600 would participate. So today is a very important day because the government has announced the budget for the year 2026. We have really have a very good and very erudite speakers who will really speak on the different aspects, which will give both our members and other and all other participants the benefit and the details of what the budget is. If you look at the budget itself, it is more oriented towards growth rather than incentives that people are looking at. I think our country needs to go on a growth path, and with the support of the IMF, we have been able to manage our affairs quite well, both on the financial side and also on the management of the different organizations. Still, a lot of things have to be done, and I'm sure that there are certain things in this budget that will really help in that area. One area on the growth side that I saw was the public-private partnership. Public-private partnership means the association between the private sector, maybe either foreign or local, plus, of course, the government or the public sector. Now, this, I feel, would be one of the real, if maybe projected properly and planned properly, would be one of the best ways that we could get growth, development, and also foreign direct investment to our country. So I must thank the Excellency, the President and the Finance Minister for putting through this idea, and very soon act will come. Now on this area, just I really know that this was a concept that was there quite some time ago, because I've also been involved with the government sector, maybe with the corporation sector, with the Board of Investment. And at that time, we promoted this public-private partnership. The Commonwealth Foundation were really supporting us, and we had very many seminars, and the World Bank gave support to set up and train a separate unit for this purpose. And one of the projects that came up as a result of this public-private partnership is the SAGT. The Colombo Port project, SAGT, was the one, I think it may be the one and only that was there, because after that the whole thing was dissolved. And I just want to tell you that if this public-private partnership was implemented at that time, today we will not be in this situation of being in a debt trap or to go for loans. But they took the easy path where they were able to get funding from different countries where no evaluations were done, where no projections were done, and ultimately we had no way of repaying these loans. So that's why public-private partnership is something where both get together and they work out the viability, because a person will only invest if the project is viable. So I think this was one of the biggest mistakes, or one of the main causes for the reason that we are having this 100 million debt today, because of this particular thing. Then, of course, I must also say, connected with this is the Board of Investment. This was set up as the main arm for foreign direct investment. I just want to tell you some experience that I had with this country has benefited. At the time that in 91, we set up the BOI, it was the Greater Colombo Economic Commission. And at that time, I'm just telling this, that if this path is followed, then definitely this public-private partnership will succeed. There'll be so much of foreign direct investment that will come to this country. So that is what I want to explain is that one thing is everyone says it should be a one-stop shop. Yes, it was a one-stop shop. And also the Board of Investment was under His Excellency the President. As per the Act, it is there. So that gave all the powers to this organization to take decisions and go ahead and convince foreigners that money could be invested without any fear. If you look at the World Trade Center, that was set up during that time. One of the biggest mistakes that we did was the Strategic Development Act, trying to take away the powers of the BOI. I think that should be scrapped. And this BOI taken over by the President, and transparency. If a person comes to invest, they will know what they will get. SDP creates a big doubt. What is going to happen? So if the government wants to really take it forward, I'm just telling because Mr. Duminda is there. I'm a very, one of our leading chartered accountants, and he will be able to take this because I know that he's going to speak on this, but this is the way to be done. So I thought these two, if done very effectively and properly, and of course with the strength of the President, no one will come and interfere. When we went around the country to set up the factories, no interference. We used to do it and we used to implement it. In addition to that, at that time, the exports were 500 million. Today it is 5 billion. So what I can say is today, foreign direct investment is 800 million. It will very soon go up to 8 billion if these things are adopted. So that's how things should work. And I'm sure that this budget has paved the way for that. But we need to see how it would be taken forward. And I'm sure we have very good and trusted people who are in positions who can do this. I think one person I can talk of is Mr. Duminda Hulangam. Those days he used to come every day for our budget seminar to speak on taxation. But now he is coming to speak on economic matters, how this country can be taken forward. So I am sure that we have given a very suitable person, a very eminent person from the chartered accounting profession to go into and help the country to develop this country. So once again, let me thank everyone, and I'm sure that we need people of that caliber. Almost all the others who are here are there to help and support it. And let me thank everyone. I must also thank the two moderators, Mr. Gajendran and Mr. Dinesh Virakodi, who will be driving the whole thing. And I wish this budget seminar all the best. And my grateful thanks to everyone for the good support that they have given us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Next on the agenda is the overview of the budget proposals 2026, which will be delivered by the Senior Economic Advisor to the President and Country Managing Partner, EY, Mr. Duminda Kulangama. Over to you, Mr. Duminda.
Thank you, Gajen. You can hear me?
Yeah.
we can.
So first of all, I want to, congratulate Professor Vatawala for the immense stamina and the courage he shows in conduct not only the budget highlights, but whatever event that happens of importance. He's one of the first to bring it to the public awareness by conducting various seminars and workshops, and is able to attract large number of speakers, panelists from different walks of life, and that energy and stamina I can see is continuing. Professor, thank you very much for doing this for the accounting profession. Not only that, but I was the Ceylon Chamber Chairman, you were helping us, and even the Economic Summit, you are the one who started. So I think you have immense vision and stamina in the contribution that you make to the accounting profession, people at large. And I'm going back to be OI Chairman, People's Bank Chairman. I've been doing for those days. So you are showing the same level of enthusiasm and stamina to continue this work, and all the best, and hope you'll be able to do this for many years to come. And thank you very much once again, Professor, for inviting me to address this CMA post-budget discussion. So as you said, all of you have seen the budget speech. You have heard the budget speech delivered by His Excellency the President. And so I will talk to you more on the economic and the growth side. The budget was very broad in that it covered multiple sectors, from economy to agriculture to rural development to SMEs. So a number of sectors was covered, but I'll just talk on areas that will affect the business as a whole. I was there this morning also at the LEFT session. So my view was that you should look at the growth strategy for the country beyond the budget. The budget will spell out the broad economic policy the government wants to continue, but it goes beyond the budget. You see, any country, if you take the countries the Far East, they're really developed, like Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia to an extent, and now Vietnam. What is the key fundamental based on which these countries are really galloped in the growth space? A is consistency, predictability in policy. Those countries don't have policy changes, drastic policy changes year on year. They don't have drastic tax policy changes year on year. Fiscal policy, inflation targets, interest rates, those are very, very stable. The macro fundamentals are very stable in those countries, whichever government is ruling it. So to me, that is one of the, and even for the government, for the people's country, one of the most important things to bring stability and growth is that you need to have consistency and predictability in business. You should be able to predict what is the next year going to be, thereafter going to be, if the investment I make this year, will the situation change, will the laws change, will the tax laws change? That is one of the most important aspects required for growth. And that is the predictability, consistency the President has been able to give this government. If you look at the budget, there is no drastic change to any other policies that were there in the last year. The IMF program is on track. The USTR discussion is on track. So we have not made any significant changes so that you can plan and predict your business. That is one of the fundamental causes, reasons for growth, and even to attract FDI. The second is, what is most important, is the rule of law. No country will progress if there's no rule of law. Respect for rule of law has to be there. And that is something that the government has brought in the last 1 year. The law applies to everyone equally. There's no one above the law. You can see what has happened in the past. We're able to build confidence, both internationally and locally, on the application of the rule of law. And transparency and good governance. There is no need for business community to go behind people, get things done. We have created an environment of a level playing field where everyone is equal and everyone can compete on their own. Of course, competitive bidding will slow the process, but at least it will not be free of corruption, be free of any deals taking place. I think the classic example, and we are able to bring it to the good sense of the people at a reasonable rate. And the classic example of following transparent and good practices in public procurement is the recent award, which the President also mentioned in Parliament, of the two power plants, 50 megawatt power plants, wind power plants in Silavatura, where the government invited tenders, and we received bids below 4 cents per dollar. One lot was given 3.96, the other lot was given 3.77. Now that is a result of following a transparent bidding process. These are contracts that were not subject to bidding earlier, where the rate was over 8 US cents per unit without bids and 500 megawatts, not 50 megawatts and 100 megawatts. So you can see what difference we have made to the bidding process, and that is the transparency that both foreign and local investors are looking for when it comes to doing business. So that level playing field, this important fundamental of transparency, rule of law, level playing field, predictability and consistency in law policy is essential fundamental to growth and development. Whatever tax law, for example, we have had tax holidays in the past. We have had very generous tax holiday running up to 40 years, 25 years, 15 years, concessionary tax rates. But did it bring the growth we are looking for? No, it didn't bring the growth we are looking for. Why? Because these very fundamentals are not there. That is the reason why FDI comes to this country in the way and the leaps and bounds that we want it to. So I think that is the very foundation based on which this other things will pile up. So whatever that we do will be complementary on top of this. So that is the first message I want to give this audience, is that we have brought the transparency, rule of law, consistency and predictability in law, so that you can see that is indicated stock market is now almost 20,500. The index has gone through. So that is the confidence that we have been able to give to the market. The dollar without any intervention has been around 300 rupees. That is in spite of the fact that we have opened the vehicle market and over $2 billion worth of LCs have been opened already. And we have serviced about 3,000 or $3 billion worth of foreign debt we served this year. So in spite of all that, we have been able to keep our reserves almost $6.5 billion of reserves we have been able to keep, and we hope that by end of this year it might go about $6.7, $6.8 billion of reserves. So we don't intervene in the market, and we have kept the dollar at about 300. Interest rates are below 10%, inflation is below 5%. So the macro fundamentals are very well in place for the growth to take place. Then coming to the budget, and those are the very foundation upon which the budget was built. But if you take the specific areas that are fundamental growth, if you see the president's speech, I mean, there was a lot of reference to private sector participation, investment growth process. And the professor mentioned at the beginning of this is the public-private partnership law, which successive governments have been trying to bring, we couldn't do it. And we're happy to say that we have finished the public consultation. The chambers are part of it, the president was a part of it. The PPP law will go to parliament. Very likely, the AG will approve it perhaps this month. And then we'll be able to bring that to law in most likely in the first quarter of next year. That will pave the way for public-private partnerships to take place. The evaluation of projects, what kind of public-private partnership we can go into, the selection of projects, all that will be scientifically done by the PPP unit. Then we are also bringing the SOE law, which she mentioned. The SOE law is actually is largely to commercialize the commercial ventures, to make more transparency into them, more accountability, more good governance into them. And also perhaps later on, maybe once the structure is in place and we have sort of a Temasek model in place, we might list parts of the shares of these companies in the stock exchange. That is the roadmap the president has created. He said first we'll form a holding company, bring the institution under them, and in the future maybe that we'll take them to the market on a phased out basis. So that is also again creating the space for the private sector to participate in the development process. The next reference that she made was with regard to the free trade agreements. Now, this is something that has been talked about a lot about free trade agreements. So, as you know, free trade agreements are not easy to do. I mean, there are two sides to it always, right? There's a domestic market we have to look after. At the same time, we have to open up our markets for imports if we are to be export competitive. We have to become export competitive, we'll have to open our markets. We have to become more competitive. We have to make sure that resources are adequately, properly used. And therefore, at some point of time, we need to do all the FTAs. Now, the issue with FTAs is that now for country like India, it's very easy to do FTAs. There's a big market, Indian market, 1.5 billion people market. A lot of countries want to go to India and it's easy for them to do FTAs. But Sri Lanka is a small market. So for countries like the EU or the UK or the US, Sri Lanka is not big enough to do a FTA for them. So where are the markets that we look at? Eastern Asia is the area that we should look at. But Eastern Asia is very competitive. It's in terms of price, in terms of market size, very competitive because China is dominating the Eastern Asian markets. Vietnam is dominating the Eastern Asian markets. They have very attractive FTAs within the ASEAN countries. So for us to enter ASEAN and do a FTA and make sure the FTA work both ways is not an easy task. But of course, having considered the need for FTA, she has appointed, cabinet has appointed a committee to look into the FTAs and see which country we should go into, which country will be priority. Are we backloading or front-loading the FTA benefits? What are the rules of origin that we should do? RCEP, we have already made an application to RCEP to join the RCEP, and the application now has been accepted. They want us to make a second application to consider for memberships. That we have a 90-day period. We'll do that in the next 90 days. So all those we are doing. But to me, to be competitive in the FTA, even with the FTAs, Sri Lanka has to have a good supply chain of access to raw materials, access to labor in order to be a manufacturing destination. So, but having said that, FTAs are important, and therefore we are negotiating. We appoint a committee looking into the FTAs to see what kind of FTAs we need and what are the countries that we have in the priority list. The next area that we have another issue is on investor protection. People are saying that when we make investments in Sri Lanka, looking at what happened in the past, at least on one occasion where companies are taken over by government, by legislation, to prevent that, to give confidence to the investors, to foreign investors that the investment is safe in this country. There is the Investor Protection Act in the first quarter of next year as well. Then, with getting to zoning, the president is very keen that the development of this country, or the results or the benefits of development must go to all areas of the country. It should not be confined to the Western province, and that's why we allocated 1 billion rupees in this budget to set up at least 10 industrial estates in 10 districts. The BOI is already working on the northern districts of Jaffna and Kilnochi, and we are trying to, and Trincomalee, we are trying to say that we can take this, have more industrial estates in the provinces so that we can take the developer into the provinces. Of course, we know the limitations that we have. The infrastructure is limited, road network access. So we need to identify districts that have better access, road network in order to do that. And we have already allocated funds. President mentioned in the budget that we are going to set up two IT parks in Kurunegala and Galle. There are already facilities there, but that's all in very bad shape. So we need to bring it up to good working condition. And there are some loans outstanding. We have to pay those off. And we have to set up two ideas that by next year we set up these two IT parks in Kurunegala and Galle, so that we provide opportunity to the children and the IT graduates in those areas to enter the economic development of this country. Then, of course, there was emphasis on digitalization. You saw that the digitalization effort of the government is going to have top priority. 25 billion rupees allocated for the digitalization, and then, of course, that's with the Indian grant. We are going for the digital backbone, which my colleague Hans is doing, where that is with the backbone for the entire country. The digital backbone will be set up with the Indian assistance, and then you can connect the Inland Revenue, the RMV, the customs, all can be connected to this backbone once it is done, and we bring public service very efficiently and execute at a very short period of time with the digitalization program, very ambitious program, and we feel that a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy that you see today can be cut down with the digitalization program of the government. Of course, it might be a 3-4 year project, but that is what our strategy is. Then, of course, the SDP and the Port City Act has been reformed. The SDP Act, which was very discretionary in terms of the tax holidays they gave, we have been a rule-based. The bill will go to Parliament very likely next week for approval, and that we have a rule-based investment where you specify the investment and the tax holiday like what we had at the BOI, and then the levels of approval. Earlier we had to get at least 1 year takes to be SDP get approved, because there were 2 layers of cabinet approvals required earlier, but now we have reduced it to one approval by the Finance Ministry and Cabinet for ratification and go to Parliament. So we cut the process to about 3 months from last. Earlier it was about 1.5 years takes for a BOI SDP project to get approved. And so it's very simple, rule-based SDP law we are bringing. The Port City law has been also amended, and those amendments come to Parliament before the end of this month. That again is going to be a rule-based concession scheme, and we also removed the 25-year tax holiday and to 15 years because we feel that we have to be tax holidays, but at the same time it has to be rational, and we can't allow it to be at the cost of the greater economy. So those laws, we feel that these 4 laws will provide the framework and the impetus for FDIs as well as local investment and to bring the growth into this country. Then on top of that, I just want to also mention that we have putting a lot of money on public infrastructure. And those are all connected to the economy. the president's vision is to create aviation hub in Sri Lanka. And he wants that to happen at least in the end of the third or fourth year of his government. And that is the reason. With that, of course, to have aviation hub, you must first have good airport and have good airline. So the airport, most likely, we feel that the evaluations can complete by end of this year. And we hoping we can award the airport tender by April or May of next year latest, so that we can commence the work on Terminal 2 of Bandar International Airport. And take 30 months to complete. Once that is done, the airport can facilitate and accommodate tourists, large number of tourists and visitors. We feel that Sri Lankan Airlines, with the plan that have been given to us, we can refleet the Sri Lankan Airlines. We are talking about Boeing and Airbus. So we feel that we can take the fleet from 22 to about 35 by end of the 5th year, so that we have a reasonably good and sizable airline and a good airport to create a regional aviation hub for Sri Lanka. Then on the expressways, we already started the Mirigama stretch of the expressway. Ramukkana Galagidri will be awarded next year to local contractors, and the balance part of Ramukkana will also be completed next year. So the first phase of the expressway from Kadotha Mirigama and Ramukkana Galagidri might take about another 3 years to complete, but within 3 years we feel that we can, with our own funds, we can complete these projects. So there are a lot of public investment that is going to be invested in the next 3 years for the development of this country, to provide the infrastructure necessary to take it to the next layer. Of course, our biggest emphasis is on the tourism sector. We have a lot of plans we have developed for the tourism sector with the digital marketing plan, as well as improving the infrastructure for tourism, and then also diversify the product. For example, in Colombo, we are trying to increase the museum presence, contemporary art museum we are trying to put up. Then also we are trying to put the street markets for Colombo. Like that, then we are trying to diversify the product in the historical sites from Sigiriya to Anuradhapura, as well as wildlife park. So a lot of development, a lot of plans are there to see how you can diversify the product and encourage higher tourism into the country. Of course, the last item is the port and logistics, which we are very confident we have the advantage. We are already working on West Terminal 2 and the port logistics center. Most likely, we'll try to award the contract next year to set up an international class logistics center into the port of Colombo, and then also West Terminal 2 Breakwater. Hopefully, we can start next year, and the terminal after everything goes well. So those are the plans that we have for the development. I feel with all these things coming to place, Professor, all this is coming to fruit, we should hit about 7% growth rate in 3 years' time from now. So those are the plans that we have. As I told, it goes beyond the budget, and it goes beyond the budget, and we need to make sure that these policies stay in place, and we all work together to make sure, and we support everyone to make sure this country is a better place for all of us. So with those few words, Professor, I'll stop. I hope I have covered everything what you wanted. If I missed out anything, please do ask any questions. I can take the session.
Thank you very much, Duminda, for giving an overview, and we are hopeful that everything will work. That's the most important thing, the practical aspects, how it will work and make things efficient. I think our moderator, Dinesh Veerakkudi, has a question for you. So can I ask Dinesh to ask that question?
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hi, Duminda. I have two
Hi,
questions
Duminda.
for you. The first question is, what are the big ticket opportunities for the private sector and foreign investment in the current budget? And also, are there any landmines the private sector needs to watch out?
Well, also there are landmines, I can say that. But the opportunities is that Dinesh, now although I said that it goes beyond the budget, although there was a specific mention in the budget, in the renewable energy and the transmission sector, the president wants to open out the next phase of development to FDI. We are talking of we are looking at floating solar and more than anything, the transmission line development, because most of the wind power that is being developed in the north and east and the solar has been transported down, and you don't have enough transmission lines for that. And there's a big investment. Next 5 years, about $500 million of investment for that in the next 5 years. So the chief is very keen that we open out the transmission sector to private investment, perhaps if it's possible, is FDI. And the next phase of renewable energy development also to FDI. So those are opportunities available. On the domestic side, I think, that this big construction sector that you're opening out with the public infrastructure, a lot of construction companies can get back into business. And the port city also, where you were before, we have signed already about $1 billion worth of gazette notification published, and we feel that those hospitals can start by next year. So we feel in that space, if you can get about $2-3 billion into the market, that definitely have knock-on effects, and the private sector here in different areas can benefit, in my view.
Okay. Duminder, something that you didn't talk about is talent and building skills. And I think that is critical for our future success. Does the government have a strategy to support that growth?
Yes. So you are very right. So we have, if you take skills, now if you take, for example, where we need large number of people, is the vocational training and technical skills. So we want to revamp the technical colleges and the what do you call the vocational training education system, because there are so many, about 4 or 5 vocational institutions are working now, and technical colleges. So those have to be revamped and brought under one umbrella organization, and the quality of the degrees that we are awarding have to be really improved. So there is a plan to revitalize the vocational training and skills development and the industry, technical colleges, etc., to cater to the vast demand of people. But on the other areas, if you take one is IT. So on the IT side, we want to invite more private universities to come here and set up. In fact, the Port City, we are trying to open up RFP for a university to set up. And we feel that the SLIT, NSBM, and all of them are turning out graduates. So we need to encourage them more in order to see more graduates come, because that's the one problem we're having is the skills of the people. And we need to do a lot more, in my view, in trying to produce more graduates to be absorbed into the IT service sector.
Yeah,
Duminder, on that area. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Prof.
Yeah. Duminder, actually, we are very, very sorry that the professional area is really neglected, When they talk of skills, now say you are a product of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, a professional body, non-profit making, self-funding. You see, and there are now all the professional bodies, the government never speaks of professional bodies. Why? Because we don't want money from the government, but at least tell the good things that we are doing, because at least we are giving the education, we are giving the training, and they are all job ready. So can you kindly see that they also speak on profession? Everyone is talking only university and technical colleges, but we have forgotten where some of the best people. Now you are the economic advisor. We have produced a very, very good product, So why not you promote that idea?
That is a recognition of the profession.
No. They don't talk of. You see, when they tell the people
I understand.
to get
I
a
understand
job,
what you're saying. Yes.
I think kindly see that you are able to
Yes,
spread
certainly.
this message, Otherwise, we are doing free education. No, we don't ask money from government. Sorry,
Okay.
Dinesh, we have one more.
So Duminder, my last question to you is one of the concerns all governments have had is the delivery of the public service. Is the government doing something to incentivize these guys to start performing at their peak?
So Dinesh had different levels. If it is with the government service, we have different layers there, right? So we feel the digitalization, the extensive digitalization we are talking of, we are talking of not just putting computers on table, we are talking of changing the landscape altogether in the digitalization space. Now that will bring efficient service to the public in the medium to long term, where people have to go and queue up for ID cards or passports or driving licenses. The day-to-day stuff we are trying to see, his first objective is that to see how you can cut the red tape, cut the bureaucracy, reduce interaction with the government, with the public service, and bring that service more efficiently, cost-effective, speedily to the people. Now there will be the next layer, on top layer, which is the decision-making layer, which is wanting in terms of the speed at which the decisions are taken. But Dinesh, now having got into government, I don't blame them, because it's not easy. You also in government, right? So it's not easy making public policy, right? The FRs, ARs, the procurement laws are absolutely mind-boggling, right? To get a procurement takes 6 months. So that's the problem, because procurement laws are designed and drafted to prevent fraud. So the presumption is there will be fraud, and procurement laws are drafted to prevent fraud. So that is where the problem is. So we need to, the president is very concerned about this, because to do any procurement in government takes about 6 months. So actually, you sometimes feel that they are doing that on purpose. No, I don't think so. I have now worked with government the last 1 year. I can see how difficult even for me to float a tender. Now, for the last 6 months, I'm trying to put a tender out for the NLDB farms, right? So it's because of the procurement process, the approval, project committee, high-level procurement committee, cabinet tender committee, bid evaluation committee, it has to go through all those phases in order to get a project award. I'm sure aware of that. So that is where the issue is. Our procurement laws are so tough because they're designed to prevent fraud, right? So presumption there's fraud. So that is why it's taking a lot of time. So people feel they're taking time, but I think that is where the problem is. So government servants are petrified to take a decision because they feel that if something wrong, they can be found fault, which happens. So that is where I think the problem is. So that is to do more with the mindset, more to with the laws that we have. So that's something that we need to look at separately.
Okay. Dominda, finally, given that you're a tax expert, is there hope for these taxes to come down at some point?
Well, Dinesh, we also President is very, very concerned about it. He's very sensitive to the issue that most people who earn their income monthly is paid as taxes. VAT is 18%, SSL 2.5%, high duties at import point. But unfortunately, Dinesh, the issue is as much as everyone wants and he wants the rate to be brought down, the current challenges are such that we can't because most of our expenses other than capital expenditure is non-discretionary. So as a 5.3 trillion income we are targeting, 7 trillion, I mean, if you remove 1.4 trillion of capital expenditure of 7 trillion, 5.6 trillion is what you earn is entirely non-discretionary. It goes public service salaries, welfare schemes, and interest costs. So it's not difficult to draw the interest costs down. I mean, not significant, at least we have kept it under certain limits. So until I can't see until we get fiscal space, we will not be able to bring the rates down in the near future, is my view. But the president is determined to bring it down as soon as possible.
Thank you, Dominda.
Thank you very much, Dominda. I think we
Please
are
excuse me, Professor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor, for inviting me. Thank you very much.
I hope that you will be looking after the professional sector also.
Yes, very much. Yes.
Okay, thanks. We are very happy that you are doing an excellent job. And
thank you,
helping the
Professor.
government, because we need people like you from the professional bodies to go and help the government and tell them that
yes,
these are institutions that can really deliver the goods.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
correct. Thank you very much, bro. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Over to you, Gajendra.
Yeah, thank you. And Dr. Kabila Senanayaka, Director General, Department of Fiscal Policy at Ministry of Finance, will explain about the fiscal policy, government taxation and expenditure control. Over to you, Dr. Kabila.
Dr. Kapila, we have permitted screen sharing. If you want to put your PowerPoint, you can do that.
Yes, could you please give me just 1 minute? Meeting then.
Yeah, fine. You're muted.
You can see
Yes, we can.
presentation. Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, ICMA, for giving this opportunity to share our views on the budget, as well as my special thanks goes to Professor Lakshman Vatapala for giving this opportunity with this to announce some of our performance on the fiscal policy, government taxation, and expenditure control for this professional body and other participant as well. So if you look at our budget, so you can see it is expected that we have ambitious target of 7% economic growth, and also over the medium to long term 15 to 20% of tax to DGP ratio. And also it is also envisaged that direct tax to indirect tax ratio to have 40 to 60% from 25 to 75%, 75.5, and also the expenditure ratio remain at 19 to 20%. And the other expectation is to have at least primary surplus of 2.3% over the medium term. And as well as per the PFM law, so we have this constraint, that is the ceiling of primary expenditure to GDP ratio should be minimum at least 13% of GDP. And it is also in as per the so it is also expect to have this central debt, government debt to GDP ratio would be about 80% reduction. So at present the rate is 114.2%, but this year it will be further reduced to 96.8%. So you can see with this improvement, we can have we can achieve this target. So only thing we have to think, only thing is we have to increase denominator, that is GDP. With that, so I would like to give this the kind of snapshot of our budget outturn during the first 9 months of this year. So you can see our tax revenue, including our total revenue, including tax revenue and non-tax revenue, is about it is 3.8 trillion. That is, as per the estimate, you can see it's a achievement of nearly 77%. In terms of expenditure, you can see there's a really reduction of the achievement is nearly 60%, because you can see capital and net lending, there is a low execution. So it's about 35%. So with all these development, you can see we recorded primary surplus of 1,465 during the first 9 months of 2025 compared to 785 billion in 2024. So I think this is because of impressive revenue performance as well as the low execution of capex. So if you so I want to just highlight, I just compare actual performance against estimate revenue from 2014 up to now. You can see the difference. So the realization in 2014 was about 58% during the first 9 months, and this has reduced to 52% in 2021. And now you can see this year is about 77% achievement. It means that we can achieve this revenue target this year very easily. This is because of actually improvement of VAT collection as well as revenue from motor vehicle import, as well as taxes on corporate and income tax increases. So as Professor like want to have our budget outturn, so I just explain, I just have listed out just a summary of budget outturn 2024, 2025, and also the 2026. You can see that in terms of GDP, our revenue to GDP ratio would be about 15.4% next year. I think you can see there will be a reduction from this year, 15, because this year we had anticipated about 15.9% revenue to GDP ratio. It will be there will be a reduction in next year, 15.4%, because there will be we anticipated there will be a reduction in imports of motor vehicles. So that's the main issue. And tax revenue also remained 14 will be reduced to 14.2% of GDP. However, expenditure will be remain as it is 20.5%. You can see public investment to GDP ratio will be increased to 4% of GDP next year. This year it would be about 3.2%, even though we estimate 4%. All in all, so you can see we can have a 2.5% of primary surplus. That would be really helpful for the current account balance as well for external sector. So this year, budget deficit could be about 4.5%. Next year, it could be about 5.1%. So this is our medium-term perspective. So you can see that our revenue and grants, so it will be remain at about 15% over the years, medium term. And total expenditure also remain about 19 to 20%. Here you can see there will be a rationalization of government expenditure from this year 25% to 19.4% by 2030. This is because of rationalization of salaries and wages, and there will be a reduction of interest cost as well over the medium term, as anticipated by Public Debt Management Office. Capital and expenditure would be about more than 4% over the medium term. So it means that we can have achieved 2.6% primary surplus over the medium term. So over the in a similarly, budget deficit also will decline to 5% to 4% over the medium term. So this is the same thing that you can see the visualization of the medium term perspective. And I want to highlight one thing here also. You can see our revenue path over the years from 1990s up to now. So 1990s, our revenue ratio was about 20 to 19%. It has declined to 7.3%, which is historically low level in 2023. So now you can see, because of our revenue-based fiscal consolidation, in line with IMF parameters, we were able to increase this tax to GDP ratio 14.8% this year, and next year it would be about 14.2%. This is very important graph that I think even investors also looking for. Interest payment to revenue ratio. You can see that during the period after 2019 to 2023, interest payment to revenue ratio is about 70%. In 2023, it was 80.5%. So we have only remained 20% for the payment of salaries, subsidies, and goods and services. Then you have to borrow. Then it means then you have to borrow. So now you can see there's an improvement in this year as well. It will reduce to 52.2% this year, and next year it will be reached to 49. By 2030, it will be reached to 42%. This is very important for even investor rating as well. That's very important, that aspect. And also the salaries and wages, you can see there is a really improvement 2023, 2024 and onwards. So we can see there's an improvement. Actually, as Professor explained, so I really hard to get this done. this categorical allocation of primary expenditure, you can see that almost 16% goes to social protection and education, 13.4%, public safety and national security, 13.5%, health sector, 12.4%. It means that if you see the social capital, education and health, it is almost 25%. Transport and logistic, 8.5%. Public sector, 7.8%. Food security, 5.1%. Entrepreneurship, 2.3%. You can see out of all these primary expenditure, 16%, 25% goes to capital, social capital, and next social protection. With this time constraint, I have some concluding remarks. So as you see that our macroeconomic indicators doing really well. So the macroeconomic fundamentals are in place. So that's why the country has restored stability. To country to stability to sustain level, we have to have structural reform, because that's really very crucial. So we can't stop introducing of structural reforms, targeting of very because we have to have very private sector driven economy with special attention to FDI and export, digitalization, especially institutional development, and also protecting poor and vulnerable, and also while keeping our fiscal sector discipline, and also the debt sustainability. So this year we have allocated 4% of capital expenditure, 4% of GDP. So that's very important of the execution of this capex over the medium term to get this 7% growth. And for this, actually, even this professional body like you, and also the entrepreneurs and private sectors should work together, even the government sector. So government sector's role remained as a facilitator, but private sector role is to have a kind of engine of growth. That's, I think it's really included in the budget as well. So finally, my comment is we really need far-sighted, much needed structural reforms to unlock potential and transformative growth of 7% in the medium term. So that's very critical to assure stability to sustain growth. That's my actually concluding remarks. Thank you, Professor, and also the participant, as well as ICMA, for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kapila. I know that during the last few weeks, you were working very hard, because you were really one who had gone through all these figures. So I thought that you're coming and telling us, because all this time we were looking maybe at the tax figures and others, but today all our members and all our participants were really given a detailed view of how the budget is looking at, and how what sort of indicators you all need. And I'm thinking these very useful, but I'm sure sometime later we can have maybe a detailed maybe workshop with you to find out everything. Dinesh, I don't know whether you have any question because Dr. Kapila also will be going. He has to go to Parliament. Anything that you want to ask?
No, Doctor, he covered everything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Kapila. We are very thankful to you. And we are also for shaping the budget. I know that you all are the people behind it. So you have done an excellent job. And now it is, of course, up to the private sector to maybe implement this, as you said, and to go for 7% growth. Thank you, and all the very best.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
And implementation is the key. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next on my agenda is the Taxation Proposal 2026, which will be delivered by the Managing Partner of Ranavira Associates, Mr. Atula Ranavira. Mr. Ranavira, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'll share a document. Is it visible?
No,
Not
not
yet.
yet, not yet, not yet.
Right. Okay. Now I think now it is visible. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Within about 15 minutes, I'll try my best to cover up the budget speech, the tax content in taxation, the budget. Right. As usual, once a year after the government budget, we used to have a public session like this. Right. Now, in this document, I'll be touching three areas. One, the government budget estimate 26 and the government revenue during recent past. Actually, these two areas, of course, is covered by Dr. Kapila also. Right. Then my main area is proposed tax related changes. Now, as Dr. Kapila also mentioned, I have extracted this from the last 2 years' budgets. Our total tax revenue to GDP, as last year, 2025, we planned for 15.9%. And this year, we are planning for 15.4%. But when we compare this 15.9% with the 2024, it's a rapid increase, 1.2% increase. That is mainly because of certain changes into the tax law and strengthening the remis systems with the IR. Right. Then the total expenditure, when we compare with 2024, it was 20.5% of the GDP. Then 25 revised, it was 20.5 again. Then this year also we are estimating more or less same. Now, as a result, in 2024-25, our budget deficit, the budget surplus or deficit, the deficit was 4.5%, but we are expecting a slightly increased budget deficit of 5.1% for 2026. Right. Now, if you'll see the government revenue during recent past years, now I managed to get information only up to 2024. Now, tax income. When we take the tax income, it has rapidly increased. Now, during 2020 and 21, it was down due to various decisions taken by the government at that time, as well as at that time with the COVID situation, with financial crisis. Anyway, thereafter, in 2022, it increased to 534 billion. Then 2023, 911. And 2024, we achieved 1,025 billion. Then tax base, now when we take this tax revenue, now this is the income tax. If we'll take 24 income tax, when it is 1,025,000 millions, the indirect taxes, now this is a direct tax, right? Indirect tax counts a major portion. Now see this indirect tax, based on consumption like VAT, SSCL, NDBT, excise duty and all, then on import, it comes to a material amount. That means as Dr. Kapila also mentioned, our indirect taxes percentage is very much high compared to the direct taxes. Right. Anyway, government is trying to minimize this gap between these two. Right. Now we'll move to the tax-related proposal. Unfortunately, this time budget speech, there aren't a technical statement. Usually, we used to read the technical statement and gather the information with relate to taxes. But this time, it made us to read the entire thing and gather the information. Now, anyway, we'll see those things. One major change is the reduction of VAT and SSCL registration threshold. VAT and SSCL registration threshold. At present, the registration threshold is 60 million a year. If you take on yearly basis, it is 60 million a year. They are proposing to reduce it to 36 million a year. The proposed date is 1st April 2026. I have given some remarks or how I think what will be the effect to the economy and to the general public. And all. One problem, can the resource persons available at because now when we reduce this threshold, definitely the number of files will go up. Then there should be a capacity to with the tax administrator to manage these things. Whether the IRD is in a position to manage the increase in volume of this number of files with relate to VAT and SSCA. Because even at present, we can see there's a big capacity issue at the IRD level. Human resource, insufficient human resource. And the educational, the tax subject knowledge, there's an issue on that also. With that situation, this may be difficult for them to manage. Then, will this affect to the promised risk-based refund system of SVAT? Now, SVAT cancelled and introduced a risk-based refund system. Now, when their workload is getting increased, whether that will affect to the risk-based refund system, which covers mainly the exporters and long-term projects. If this is badly affecting to the exporters, that will be a disaster for the country's economy. Right. Therefore, we have to think about that also. Then, will the additional income substantiate the possible negative effect of losing the administrative controls? Now, definitely, with the limited resources at the IRD, the administration may be a bit difficult. Now, as a result, whether now we have to compare the additional benefit, financial benefit, what we are getting with this, compared with the losing of administration and losing of some revenue due to administration issues. Then, will this badly affect to the SME businesses? Yeah, I have a concern about that also. Now, SME businesses, now theoretically we can say, no problem, that you are collecting from the customer and paying to the IRD. You are acting as an unpaid agent to the government. That's all. Theoretically we can say. But in practical aspect, that is not the situation. In certain cases, due to competition and all, sometimes this middle level, the SME type people may be facing a lot of issues in the market. Therefore, we have to think about that also. Then the second proposal which I have selected SSCL on vehicles. Now, on vehicle imports and on vehicle manufacturing in Sri Lanka, assembling in Sri Lanka, earlier there wasn't SSCL. Instead of that, there was another tax charging on that, basically excise duty and composite tax. Now, instead of that, now they are proposing to introduce SSCL at the time of custom clearance. When you introduce SSCL at the time of custom clearance, generally they are charging on a value increased by 10%, notional profit. Then on 110%, they will be calculating 2.5%. Then at the time of selling, no need of paying SSCL. Therefore, now the existing excise duty, they are not going to remove. Then what will happen? Now, at present, traders are paying SSCL on 50% of the turnover. In future, when they import, they have to pay on 110% of the value. Therefore, definitely, the cost of these items will go up at least by 1.25%, little more than 1.25%. Now, that means that will affect to the vehicle market. Right. Then, VAT and SSCL on import of coconut and palm oil. It is proposed to remove the special commodity levy and replace with VAT and SSCL. Once they replace with VAT and SSCL, the advantage VAT is you get the input credit. Therefore, once you sell in the local market, you can charge the VAT and set off that VAT what you have paid at the customs. But SSCL cascaded effect is there. Right. Now, anyway, this proposal is welcome, because there are some people who are importing these things and selling in the local market, where the local market manufacturers, producers are paying VAT and SSCL, whereas imports are not liable. Then there's an undue competition to the local producers. Therefore, to reduce the undue competition, I think this proposal is welcome. Right. At the same time, there are some people who are importing some palm oil and all, and do various processing, crude palm oil, do further processing and selling in the local market. It's a manufacturing. Then when it comes to manufacturing, also they can claim the input VAT. Therefore, this is the good proposal. Right. Then VAT on import of fabric. This VAT on import of fabric at present, the fabric imports are not liable to VAT, but there's a special cess on that. Now, in future, what will happen? At the time of custom clearance, they'll be charging VAT on that. Then the local manufacturers and the importers are in the same boat. Then the local manufacturers will be secured their market. But this is not affecting to deferred VAT. Now, if a BOI company or any other company who is importing raw material fabric to do garment sewing and exporting it, garments exports. Now, in that case, they are not paying VAT at the customs. They defer the VAT and clear the goods. This is not affecting to them. Right. No change for them. Deferment will continue. Next, national tariff policy on imports. Even sometime back, couple of years back also, repeatedly this proposal was there in the budget speech to have certain few import duty slabs. Now this time they are proposing 0%, 10%, 20% and 30%. That's good. It's welcome. But only thing, when the government needs more money, in addition to this import duty, they charge special commodity duty, levy, or some excise duty. Anyway, this simplification is welcome. However, in this process, if any goods recategorize into a higher tariff category, now suppose this item current rate is 10%, new rate, if it is 20%, that will badly affect the cost of those. That they have to be careful. Then improving tax audit process. Yes, this is very much important. Now at present, we are heavily suffering with the delays at the IRD level. Now in VAT cases, we know there are delays for 12, 15 years. Delay, refunding of money. To refund, they have to do an audit. After auditing only, they are refunding. Therefore, when the auditing is delayed, the refund is delayed. Now, recently I got a client asking me to handle 113 uncleared VAT returns, monthly returns, exporter, 113. Now see how many years. Right. Therefore, improving the tax audit process is very much important, but at the same time, I think we have to provide sufficient resources to the IRD. Right. Then next, Telecommunication Act and Anti-Money Laundering Act, then financing of terrorism related, proposed to bring amendments to these acts to strengthen the law to secure in these fields. I think this is a needy proposal. Then the next, development of national electronic invoicing system. I think out of these proposals, the most welcome proposal and most needed proposal for a country like Sri Lanka is this. Definitely, our government has to introduce an e-invoicing system, like in UK, like in Dubai. Anybody who is doing any business should log into the government e-invoicing system. You can open an account in the e-invoicing system of the government, which is linked to all revenue authorities and administration and the ministry and all. You log into that, create an account and issue all invoices through that system. No sooner issue the system, it will get recorded with tax authorities, customs department and statistics departments and all these things, it will get connected. For permitted requirements, they can refer this information. Therefore, this is very welcome. In order to sustain the Sri Lanka tax system in operation, this is very much important. Such system will secure a lot of resources on tax, and this system will secure a lot of resources on tax administration. Here, what we are talking is an IT system, a software. Once you introduce a proper software, you can cut down a lot of human involvement with these things. And as a result, you can speed up a lot of things, especially the confidence of the kin of the IRD, that is the taxpayers. The confidence, you can build up the confidence of the taxpayer. Then next, enhance capital allowance. This is also in one place it is mentioned that it is now at present we know that there are hardly any tax concessions or incentives in our tax rules. Now, especially rather than giving 10, 15, 20, 25 years full tax holidays, this is what we should do. We have to promote the people to invest and get some concession. Now, investment capital gain, by investing into your entity, the law says in second schedule and the sixth schedule is not in operation now, this item, but second schedule it is in operation, but there's a minimum investment requirement of $3 million US. Now they are proposing to reduce this 3 million minimum requirement up to 250,000 US, where middle level people could be accommodated into that. Then the middle level people can invest in fixed capital assets and claim the enhanced capital allowances under second schedule to the Inland Revenue Act. Therefore, as a tax practitioner, I am highly recommending this proposal. I think it is a needy thing. Next, single office for IRD digitalization and digitalization. Digitalization, yes, that is very much required. Now, this computerized system for so many years we are developing. Now, especially during last 3 years, it has improved a lot. It has improved, especially during last 3 years, it has improved a lot. Now, but it needs more improvements, more capacities. Therefore, digitalization, more and more digitalization and reducing the human connection with these day-to-day activities is very much important to speed up the things as well as to cut down the corruptions. But I can't understand why we need a single office building for the IRD. In a digitalization era, why we need to put everybody together? I don't think it is required. The other thing, they say that they are allocating 2 billion rupees. Now, suppose per square foot, you have to spend 10,000 rupees. You can build only 200,000 square foot. Can you accommodate everybody in that? Definitely not. I don't think this is a worthwhile proposal. Rather than investing in buildings, it may be better for them to invest in digitalization, the government invoicing system, the digitalization of these revenue authorities, and especially the enhancement of resource persons in these places. Now, we can see that there's a lot of weaknesses on subject education of some of these tax officials. The technical education is weak. That is one problem. The other main issue is the mentality. We have to improve, to act like a private sector person. The IRD's king is the taxpayer. Therefore, they should give the due regards to the taxpayer and collect the due taxes. Right. Therefore, I think anyway, digitalization is very much important. Right. Next, exchange of tax-related information. It is proposed to exchange tax-related information with other countries and other authorities also. This is very much important to minimize the corruptions, tax avoidance and all. This is very much welcome. Last few items, structuring of tax incentives. Yes, now at present, especially under the Strategic Development Project Act, there are case-by-case approvals were there. Temporary, it is not in much operation, but when it is in operation, we should introduce a rule-based tax incentives. Therefore, we are proposing to introduce very transparent and rule-based tax incentive is very much welcome. A listing, the tax exemptions granted will be published on biannual basis. That is also very much important. These are public information, right? Therefore, we should encourage that also. Next, FDI promotions to promote foreign investors into Sri Lanka. One way is this enhanced capital allowances. Another way is to give various investment protection act. Now they are proposing to bring an investment protection act, legalizing an investment protection act. A new legal framework will be introduced in relation to this. Now, especially with this, we can give them long-term visa facilities and all, right? Then public-private partnership projects. Yes, it is very much important. Government doing business on their own should stop, and they should they should join with private sector and do the businesses. Then only they can manage these businesses properly. Therefore, this is a welcome proposal. Then bad debts in telecommunication industry, especially these telecommunication industry players, they have so many bad debts. They provide service, after that sometimes they charge, they send a bill, then they won't get it. Therefore, now there's a problem with relate to this. Therefore, they are introducing that the Telecommunication Act will be amended to accommodate this. At the same time, then IRD, Inland Revenue Act, should allow that type of bad debts, which is allowed, which is recognized as a bad debts under the Telecommunication newly amending Act. Once they amended it, that amendment to be recognized by the IR Act as well. It is welcome. Then free trade as agreements, government is proposing to sign some more and free trade agreement with various countries and various sectors. I think that is also welcome. I think this all, for me, these are the items which I have picked from the budget speech. And we will discuss these things in detail at the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranavira. Next item on the agenda is the impact of tax proposal on business, individuals and society. To deliver the speech, I welcome Mr. N.R. Gajendran, Senior Partner, Gashman Company. Over to Mr. Gajendran.
Thank you, Gajendra. And Lakshman, it's a pity, Lakshman, that every year you make a plea on behalf of the professionals. And this year also you have done that. And particularly you speak about the cost accounting and how costing is important. I think this time you overlooked it, or you must be tired of telling it and nothing's happening. So your experience is, I think, the largest in this gathering or anywhere, about 50 years, right? That has to be also has to be monetized some way or other for the government or otherwise. Otherwise, you know, we are moving from nowhere to nothing as far as the education, and particularly so, education this year, the budget is only 300 billion out of 7 trillion expenditure, not even 1% education. Earlier, we were looking promising or saying it should be 6% of the all essential expenditure is being told of, but education, even health, it's all these are important when you speak of growth. Health is also only 550 billion. That is about 1.6% of the GDP, right? So these are things which has to be, I mean, expeditiously looked into if we want to grow. That's a matter that I will be also dealing. People are happy with this government for two things, for certainly. That is, one is on this drug menace. The drug issue has been a killer, especially for schools, and that is being very ably dealt with. And also the other one is on the corruption front, on governance. Of course, it's being some criticized and say it's pretty selective. One important thing that has been recognized by the IMF, and it came out in the speech of the president also, we have been congratulated that we have achieved macroeconomic stability. A fundamental, first of the IMF framework requirement to achieve macroeconomic fundamentals so that we recover from the crisis and reestablish ourselves in a position that we can grow. The macroeconomic stability is the primary focus of the IMF. We have achieved interest rate which is at lower than single rate. Inflation is within our benchmark level. And I think sometimes we had deflation also. Current account has been a surplus and we have overperformed, mainly because the imports were restricted. And primary account, also we have overperformed, mainly because we have curbed public investments. That is, we are compromising or foregoing long-term development, future development, the generational development for the people, and we have achieved our primary account. So these are good indicators, but I don't know whether we have done it in the best of possible combination to achieve those things. And the second point of IMF framework, which is most important, is the debt sustainability, right? President said there is no need of any concern about sustainability of debt because this year we will be servicing about $2.4 billion. And even in 2028, we need only $3.2 billion. I wouldn't know whether this $3.2 billion is an additional requirement we need or the total thing. Some calculations are mentioned it will need about 7 billion in the debt repayment. And our official reserve is another indicator or pointer that we have to maintain is from 6 to 7 year. This is gross reserves, should go to 7 this year. 9, we should have around 9, 10 next year. And 2017, $13 billion or more than that for us to be, the debt to be sustainable. Because what is important is the net reserves, international reserves. The gross is 6, but the net is about 3 when you take it, the amounts that we had to pay. Apart from that, I think the local debts in foreign currency has not been calculated. So I think the surplus we have to service the debt is not 6. So we have to achieve that 13 billion so that we'll be able to service the debt comfortably. So this is another factor which the IMF is not too happy about. I think they have said that that sustainability is an issue that they have to focus on it. The Economist magazine recent in September had a small paragraph on Sri Lanka when they asked under the caption, is the honeymoon for the government is it over or is it's nearing completion? In that article, they have mentioned that Sri Lanka craves for 3 things. They have used the word craves: political stability, economic growth, and national reconciliation. They've also made an indirect difference to a deep state in that. I think last time also I mentioned this and Dinesh picked that up. And it goes on to say the people are disappointed because they wanted radical change and that is not happening. I will leave the political stability and national reconciliation out, but growth. Everyone is talking about growth and everyone says Sri Lanka can come out of this only if we grow well over 5%. And the president said we can grow over at 7%. We must grow at 7%. We did very well in 2024, more than we expected on growth because we achieved about 5. This year, I think we'll be less than 5. But next 2 years, we'll be only 3 to 4, which is very, very poor in Sri Lanka because we should have stepped up on the 5% growth. If we don't achieve growth, there will be the minimum growth we need. Analysts have said even the former central bank governor has said we must have 5% growth. We can't talk of on growth, we can't talk of incremental growth, that is not enough. But when we are talking of growth, we have to look at investments. The growth means the GDP has to grow. There are 5 components in that. There is exports, less imports. There is investment, public expenditure, government expenditure. Now, one important factor in the growth calculation, the GDP calculation, is in investments. We cannot talk of investment. We are in investment means we are in competition for investment with other countries. Investors are, it's not, Sri Lanka is not only the country. So let's see what are we going to offer from compared to the other countries. And one element is the incentives, even with the minimum global tax in picture for European countries, and they're trying to enforce it on others. And analysts have said it is for their benefit they are trying to enforce it. Even with those things, there are still incentives. I'm not talking of tax holidays. Tax holidays is a taboo for multilateral agencies, especially the IMF. I'm mentioning of expenditure-based incentives. Incentives where you give, which will boost direct impact on the GDP. That is on investment, expenditure. Investment is a component of GDP. So if you give relief, like in the case of enhanced capital allowance, they have made some adjustment to that, the way Atula mentioned to that. They have made some adjustment. We have to give recognition and encourage that. R&D. Can this country grow without R&D expenditure? Even if you see the budget speech, the only it's a small paragraph on R&D, and the allocation is only on 1.2 billion rupees on research and development. So the country doesn't have money for R&D. So they have to encourage the private sector to invest in R&D so that they will be ahead of competition in the international sphere. Generally, they say you have to invest about 3 to 6% of the revenue for R&D, right? For research and development. There has to be on branding. They have to focus expenditure. Some incentives were given earlier. We had to give on branding, sustainable environment, agro processing, and training. I think Dinesh raised the point on talent and training. We have to reskill our people because they are moving out of the country. Almost 3 million people have left this country. There is a big problem for local companies, even professional firms, to find staff, even to train and retain them. Before they train, they take off. See the hotel sector, rookies come, they are trained and they get a job and go. They don't want to stay in this country. So you have to give those incentives for the staff and also the employers to spend money to retrain them and retain them. Otherwise, how can we grow? There is no way to grow. Other countries are doing better on this. There are inadequacies and infirmities on our reform side. Labor has to be there, holidays, productivity, work ethics. True, the president said on the growth that I picked up few points at the moment. One is the corruption. Corruption is not at the highest level. There is no corruption now. And that's spoken about and that is acknowledged. And I don't think even the opposition questions about that. But below that, it's not the same story. Then you are talking of rule-based incentives, which is a very good thing. You know, the discretionary power for the ministers or whoever it is should not come in. Even if it is rule-based, there cannot be any reference to even to a gazette. It should be the gazette, if it is mentioned, the gazette should mention the criteria and the investors need not go to anywhere, right? And the implementing authorities like Inland Revenue or wherever it is, right? They must recognize that, appreciate that, and give effect to that. If there is abuse, you deal with the abuse. Because of the abuse, don't take away the incentives. Tax holidays are wrong. It's the concept of tax holidays is convoluted because, say, you have 100 million investment, but you can enjoy a tax holiday of about profits about 1 billion over a period of time, right? But if you give investment based relief in multiplier of the investment, then it is having an impact on the GDP, and also you have the companies will be able to invest, and there will be possibility for the growth for the country, also for employment and income. Now, when it comes to incentives, and President also mentioned about on rule-based laws, and also there was mention about stability and predictability. Now, this is a very important thing because the port city exemption was varied substantially. I am not saying that port city, what was the exemption given originally was reasonable. You know, it was some of the exemptions, if 40 years means they go beyond the life of a company or life of the project also, right? That is not the way to give exemptions. But these exemptions are given. And when you vary this substantially, there is an instance which I am aware of, where an IT company, they are already having employees about 100 years. They have got the primary person's approval and authorized person's approval, and secondary business of strategic importance approval has been gazetted also. And they would have invested in technology, and they would have recruited about 5,000 people in the next 3 to 5 years. But they are pulling out because the trust they don't have in the country. If you breach trust, very important. You can't turn away the foreigners for who are investing. You can't vary agreements. You can't cancel agreements. We'll have to see how one big investor can be brought here. If the investors are here, there is agreements are here, you vary the increment, there is the stability and predictability. I don't want to mention names, right? First, where the big investor can come from? The best place to get is from India. Huge country. We are just on the tip of India. We are in between East and West. So if we get some big investor, we can't turn away them, and we have to give, without investment, without incentives, without comparatively being better with the other countries, and we have to attract. Otherwise, how will they come? There is no question. All these, if one good example of Vietnam, they got off of Samsung and made Samsung. They said, will you make Vietnam a hub for your products and manufacturing base? And if you are going to do that, what do you need from us? We will give that, right? And now see, Vietnam also had exports like us about 20 years ago, about $2-3 billion. Now we have 5. They're having about 360 or 375 billion dollars in exports. Don't forget, it's a communist country, it's not a democracy, right? And it is still growing. So we have to do things not incrementally, we have to do exponentially. Otherwise, we will go into the same problem that it has been there, the debt cycling, because even the debt sustainability, I missed something, that the IMF has said in page 57, that you can read that paragraph, which is very important, because we should have restructured the debt the way the government was telling before the election. That last paragraph in page 57 in 2023 staff level agreement says, for external private debt, I quote, a principal reduction is assumed with amortization beyond the program period, implying a large NPV reduction. For official bilateral debt, similar debt relief in NPV terms is assumed, implemented through a long-term maturity extension with amortization payment starting in 2033. Other than the bilateral debts, other than the multilateral debts, Amortization, the other debts to be started in 2033. Now we are started in 2028. We can say that this earlier government has agreed on it, but we have to see how we can defer that. When you go into this crisis, when 2028, if you are trying to start paying the debt, naturally we might have another debt crunch. All this impact, the victims are the people. Poverty has grown from 14% to 24% after the crisis, according to the World Bank. I think Sri Lanka estimated the poverty earlier, it was about 17. Now it may be 30%. President has recognized this when he dealt with the slashing of the privileges of the former president. He said the people are going to bed without food. He said that there is no money to buy medicines, no schools for children, and no jobs for the youth. Now, this VAT threshold is going to increase and have an impact on poverty, because from 60 million, you have brought down to 36 million. SMEs are already destroyed, right? Now they will have further cash flow problems. Margin will thin and slim away. There will be no margins involved. Even if by chance, if they are able to pass on the VAT to the consumers, who are these consumers going to small restaurants? Who are the people going into the shopping malls where you buy clothes? Right? It is the marginalized, lesser privileged people. So they will not be able to afford it. So they will be again pushed further. If they should have given the assurance that we have 60 million people who are above 60 million, all have been brought into the net. There is no assurance on that. Without getting that assurance, what is the point going to 30? If it is 36 million, it's 100,000 rupees a day. Every other shop, corner shop, might exceed that amount these days, 100,000 rupees a day. So this is a major impact. Public sector, we must be having about 1.4 million public servants and about another 400,000 government pensioners. So we have about 2 million people. That means every 10 of us has one public servant to look after us, right? And with that, we are going to recruit another 75,000 graduates into employment. If that costs 100,000 rupees a month per head, it will be about another 100 billion in public sector expenditure going up. That's something, again, number is growing. I think last year or somewhere, someone said that we must, from the government, we should bring the public sector to 750,000 people, but that is being now forgotten and not mentioned. IRD, if I have time, I can mention, if I have time or no, Lakshman. On the Inland Revenue Department, there is the Public Finance Management Act says there is 3 requirements, benchmark for the Inland Revenue. They should be transparent, they must be fair in their decision making, and they must be efficient. Fair in the decision making, I must ask a question. Revenue officers are not here, which I have been asking in the other forums also. If 100 decisions are made by the Commissioner General on administrative review, how many are there in favor of the taxpayer? Right? How many are there? There are professionals who are here, they can tell you how many are there. Many of the decisions are not in favor of the taxpayer. I'm not talking the settlement. Then you go to the Tax Appeals Commission. Even if the Tax Appeals Commission decides, then there is a problem. It goes to the courts because they go on. Sorry. Yeah. So there is, in this mist, we have all this is being done. The
2
compliance.
minutes. 2 minutes more.
Yeah. Compliance is achieved by revenue. On compliance, we get 98.5% of the revenue. We have the challenges, but these people of the country are resilient. because we have an ABCD economy. Ala batala cost del economy. We have green everywhere. Food is there everywhere. No one can go starving too much because the neighbors won't allow. We have clean air, good water, and smiling people. How can we grow? Is the question, Lakshman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gajendran. We'll move to Talal Rafi, who will present about the impact on economy and meeting IMF structural adjustment policies. Over to you, Mr. Talal.
Right. Thank you. First of all, my thanks to Professor Lakshman Vatawala. Thank you very much for having me, and my thanks to CMA. So I'll start off, I'll roughly talk about the wider IMF parameters, then a few stats on the budget, then briefly my views, and then I'll answer a few questions that are going around in public, so to clarify them. So first of all, if you want to summarize the IMF program in a nutshell, I mean the greater parameters. So the first important thing would be a gross financing need of 13.5% from 2027. So gross financing need is the deficit plus whatever debt that is maturing and the interest payments. The second is 4.5% foreign currency debt servicing limit. So that's the second one. Then 95% debt to GDP by 2032. So I think that we should be okay with it. I mean, the president is even more ambitious, trying to make it 87% by 2030. 15% government revenue to GDP, which we are comfortably achieving. So that's the wider parameter. So coming to the budget, first of all, the deficit is projected to be 5.2%. So according to the last IMF report of June, the IMF projected deficit for 2026 is 4.5%. So we are slightly missing it by 0.7%. Inflation expected to be less than 5%, as the president said, but that is the target of the central bank as well. Revenue to increase to 20% in the medium term, he mentioned. So this is good because even during the early 1990s, that is where Sri Lanka's government revenue to GDP ratio was. I mean, until it came down drastically in the 2000s, until it hit almost less than 8% during the peak of the crisis. So that is quite ambitious and a step in the right direction. Another important thing is direct to indirect ratio getting to 40 to 60%. That is another positive because right now it's around 30 to 70, which is quite, the regressive taxes are higher. So it affects the poor. So getting more direct taxation is better. In the US, for example, the United States, direct taxation accounts to over 90%. So those are where the rich pay their share. 7% growth in the medium term. So that, I mean, if the correct reforms are put in place, we could do that. Though the IMF recently even downgraded next year's growth from 3.5% to 3.1%. So that is a little bit of a gloomy downgrade by the IMF. Global, I mean, gross reserves to approach $7 billion, the president said, which I will answer later. But the IMF projection is to be around $7.2 billion by end of this year. So currently we are at 6.1. So we are going to miss it by quite a bit. So my overall views on the budget, I would say that it's a very fiscal oriented budget. So typical, it's in an IMF program. So understood. So the focus is mostly on stability and little and trying not to take much risk. But what is needed here is growth. So currently, even the growth we are achieving, two things. One is we are just coming out of a cyclical growth recovery. So that is one thing. And, 3 to 4% growth is even if the government does not do anything or even doesn't exist, you can easily get those sort of growths. So we have to hit above 5 to 6% up and running. And how do you do that? I mean, there are probably a lot, but three key ways you can do that. One, the advantage we have that advanced economies don't have is that, there are a large number of reforms that could be done, which are, stumbling blocks for Sri Lanka's growth. Reforms meaning structural reforms, SOE reforms, trade liberalization, land, labor, regulatory, judicial. So a number of things keeping those back. And these are proven. I mean, China in 78, India in 91, most of the Asian countries after the Asian financial crisis. So reforms are essential. So growth should be on reforms so that it's sustainable. The current growth of just recovery based on consumption would not be enough and would not be sustainable in the long term. Second is increased productivity. So that's how we grow. I mean, the greatest miracle we saw of an economy, and that was a huge one, of over 1 billion people, was China. China from 1978 to current. I mean, for almost 3 decades, they grew double digits. And at one point, 14% growth. And if you observe China's growth in those decades, about half of the growth came from productivity increase. So there was a large amount of shift from agriculture to the urban areas, and also the way people were employed. In 1978, 52% of China's employment was done by the state. Right now, it's come down to 13%. So China, of course, it was a bit ruthless. A large number of people were let go by the state. Many were trained, other things. Of course, there are so many, we can't compare with China because the way it was done was different. I mean, the government artificially kept interest rates low, so people got little saving, and that allowed people to borrow much cheap for decades. So this is not possible in a democracy like ourselves. Infrastructure development, that is another thing that would be this thing, because last time's capital expenditure wasn't utilized properly. So infrastructure development, even if you look at India's example, the multiplier effect is like 2.5 to 3.5%. It's much more effective than spending on consumption. So with that, I think with the limited time, I'll answer a few things that I wanted to mention. So a broad question that is put by many is that the IMF is hindering economic growth. So because, of course, with the fiscal tightening, there is also the new thing, that comes into a crisis, which currently I have written a piece for the IMF on, is the London Consensus. So there they talk about fiscal activism. So that is in a crisis where you increase, but at the same time, you will have to have the strong institutions to make sure that once you're recovered, your fiscal deficits come down. So I've always argued that this is not possible in a developing world context. So does the IMF hinder growth? So look, we don't always have to depend on fiscal and monetary policies for growth. There are other ways to grow as well. The reforms. So for example, we say IMF hindering growth. The IMF is not stopping, government from improving ease of doing business. So we ranked 99th at the last World Bank assessment. 167th when it comes to enforcing business contracts. So according to Colombo University, they say for an SME, about 30% of the cost is administration costs. So regulatory reforms, land, labor, trade liberalization. So these are things that, you don't need fiscal space to do these. These, as we say, could be done with a stroke of a pen. So like trade liberalization, which I have always, at every panel I come, I've always said, we need to increase exports to go beyond 2028. But how do we do that? 70% of global trade is supplying value chains of multinational companies. If you look at Thailand, comparing to, the government has applied to RCEP and, if you are going to trade with ASEAN, it's difficult because ASEAN, their trade is more intermediate, intra-industry trade. And if you look at Vietnam, South Korea, it's even intra-company trade. About 25% of trade between South Korea and Vietnam is done by one company, between one company, Samsung. Samsung exports from South Korea to Vietnam and sends it back to South Korea. So that's the level they are functioning at. But if you, as I mentioned, Thailand, 50% of their exports are intermediate. Sri Lanka, it's less than 10%. So we are kept out of this thing. So trade liberalization is absolutely essential. With that comes FTAs. I think earlier Duminder was talking about more FTAs. What I'm saying is at least start off with the ones we have already signed, Singapore and Thailand. Then we can talk about RCEP and others. So Thailand's yet to be implemented. Singapore, So these are things that we need to move forward. The other things are trade facilitation. So trade facilitation, if you look at a report done recently by Verite, it shows that, in certain things to the WTO, Sri Lanka claims that we are behind on certain trade facilitation stuff, even behind sub-Saharan African countries. So these are extremely poor, low-income countries. We're a middle-income country. So these things, the IMF is not preventing anybody from doing SOE reforms, trade reforms, land, labor, judicial. So these are things which you can do and get growth. You don't always have to depend on fiscal and monetary policy for growth. So that's one point. The second thing I want to say is it's very excellent that the government is focusing very much on the fiscal side. It's very easy and very tempting for the president to, do a populist thing, but I respect him for the decision for this. But at the same time, about 2 weeks ago, I wrote an article also, because of my PhD in public debt, I've been studying a number of countries like Argentina, Mexico. If you look at countries, Sri Lanka, we have got a primary surplus last 2 years, and this year also we will do it. So we are, when it comes to budget deficit, we are at 5.2% for next year. So if you look at a country like Mexico, Mexico outdid Sri Lanka in almost everything many times. Mexico came close to collapse in 1994. But from 1983 to 1994, for 11 years, they had primary surpluses. For Sri Lanka is having a fiscal deficit of 5.2%. Mexico actually had a fiscal surplus of 3% in 91, I think, 92 surplus, 93 surplus, yet in 94, within 6 months, it was brought to close collapse. And that was also Mexico's debt to GDP was only around less than 50% of GDP. Ours is close to around 100. So the point I want to make is that, having fiscal discipline is extremely good because it, of course, helps to keep the current account in balance and helps bring the borrowing costs down later on. But you see, fiscal balance and current account balance are two things. So we shouldn't be too complacent or confident that we've got the treasury sorted, that we don't lose focus on the other thing. Because another example is also Argentina. In the 1990s, Argentina was doing extremely well. The IMF itself was praising and putting it as a poster model for the rest of the world. But what happened was, in the late 1990s, they got overconfident. They started ignoring the IMF, these things. And 2001, they collapsed, defaulted. So those are just things to be precautionary. Because one thing is, I am not in any way predicting that things would go bad. Everything the government is doing, or according to the IMF program, with the central bank also on board, is right. But what the IMF program does not predict, and what we have to be cautious of, is external shocks or internal shocks which can come. A flooding or a war in the Middle East raising oil prices, Trump suddenly raising tariffs on Sri Lanka. So these are things that trigger. So, because just to give an example, these were not the cause. I mean, if you look at India coming close to collapse, Argentina, Mexico, Russia, the Asian financial crisis, these were all, of course, they had all their problems, but it was always an external trigger. 91, India came close to collapse because Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Mexico came to collapse in 94 because US Federal Reserve increased interest rates. Argentina, the thing triggered off because Brazil devalued its currency. Russia went into a crisis because the Asian financial crisis, the contagion thing. And the Asian financial crisis was caused, which spread to South Korea and others, because Thailand, people took money out of Thailand, the foreign investors. So we should always be aware of this.
Talal, 2 minutes, huh?
2 minutes, sure. I'll do the last one and then go. So how about 2028? Will we face it? I think the president was right when he said that it's only going to be a $1 billion increase. Currently, we are paying around 2 billion. Of that, 1 billion for multilaterals, which is not, which is also refinance, an increase. But what has to be noted is that reserves have to increase from around 13 billion to 15 billion from January to December of 2028. So with the additional billion, the reserve hike, we need to go up by 3 billion if we are to meet the projected IMF targets for end of 2028. Currently, even right now, 6.1 billion, we should be getting the IMF tranche, but we should be at 7.2. So even the 6.1, it includes the Chinese swap. And if you take away the central bank liabilities of 2.8 billion, the net reserves, excluding the Chinese swap and the liabilities of the central bank, our net reserves are only, you can say, $1.9 billion. So extreme caution is needed. So I would say that the budget is good. It's extremely good to be on this and reduce the debt, but always we should move forward with caution. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I invite Mr. Dinesh Veerapudi, Chairman of Union Bank of Colombo PLC, to start the session on the panel discussion and questions.
Thank
Over to you,
you.
Mr. Dinesh.
Thank you. Before I get on to the panel discussion, I had 2 SMS questions. Is Mr. Gajendra still on the call?
Yes, he's there.
Yeah. Mr. Gajendra, are you still there or have you left?
Mr. Gajendra, no Gajendra.
Who made the keynote?
NR.
Yeah, NR.
NR is there.
Yeah. Can you unmute yourself, please?
He's there, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's yeah. Okay,
Not there.
I'll get to that question later. So to start off, I would like to ask each of the panelists to share their overviews of the budget and its potential to their particular sectors. So I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes to do that. Can I start off with Hasita?
Hasita, you're there?
Okay, maybe I'll start with Mr.
I'm here, sorry.
Okay. Over to you, Hasita.
Yeah, you can hear me, no?
Yeah, can hear you.
I'm here, Lakshman. Sorry.
Yeah.
Take your next one.
Yeah, I'll get you after
Right.
this. Yeah.
Yes. So first of all, I think, like other speakers mentioned, the policy consistency that we are seeing in this budget is something that the private sector point of view as well as exporters point of view that I would see it as a positive thing. Obviously, time to time when the budgets come in with different tax changes, tax regime changes, significant changes, it creates more uncertainty to the private sector, which is a concern. But this time around, there were limited changes, which is a positive. So that's the initial observation. And that said, also from a certain expectations from the, I'll touch on export and the apparel side and cover 3 important points. The first one being the biggest challenge that in the exporters world today is the US tariffs. So because of the US tariffs, there is a lot of uncertainty that had been created around the export markets, not only the US exports to the US, but also the rest of the world, exports to rest of the world. So there are some challenges on that front. So that's what we are currently battling out in the exporters world. So there, from a budget perspective, I mean, there weren't any specific areas being addressed. But going beyond the budget, I think we have to see how the US tariff rates, reciprocal tariff rate of 20% that was arrived at can be closed fast. Because while there have been an initial agreement that have been done over the last few months, it need to get into a closure stage and documents need to be signed, which is something that need to close. The second area is more of a connected one. So while US uncertainty sets in with these tariffs, obviously the other markets become even more important in the world of export diversification. So there are the free trade agreements. We've been talking about it for many years. It's important that the free trade agreements are being pursued more aggressively. Obviously, there is a mention in the budget about government's focus to set up a committee and pursue that. Now, February budget also had a similar type of intention being mentioned, but I think we need to move from intention to action a bit more aggressively. Why I'm saying that is because if you look at how the government reacted to the US tariffs in April, I think that's commendable because immediately a committee was formed, a task force was formed, including the representative from the government and the private sector, and then discussions went very aggressively, but obviously that was reactive. And here what we want is more of a proactive type of approach where now this committee has to quickly move into appoint subcommittees by geographies, prioritize what FTAs are needed, include the right stakeholders in the negotiation, and go for a more proactive, time-bound, focused approach to get it going, because we don't have much time in our hand today. So that's the second part, the FTA part, which need a focused action. And while budget talks about it, I think moving into proper time-bound action is critical. The third one in the exporters world that we are worried and battling with is the famous abolition of SWAT, which has been there for some time, and it went off in the September quarter. So the 1st of October onwards, now SWAT is, or the VAT is applicable on exports. So the first refund is due on 15th of January. That's the first day of refund. So all of us are watching and waiting to see that the refunds come on time. So what it had done is, in a very difficult market today, it has put more pressure on the cash flows as well as on the profitability of the exporter. So that's something that has to be managed at least within that stipulated period for the refunds to come. So we've seek transparency, and we've asked for more of escalation, fast escalation to the IMF, Finance Ministry, IRD, all of them, if there are undue overdue situations that are coming in. Good part from a budget perspective in this area is that one of the things that we have been asking is to digitize the whole invoicing process, because it takes a lot of manual work in this journey of VAT. So there, I think there is a clear proposal that has come in to digitize the invoicing. In the phase 1 of the program, exporters have been included. So I think we are happy and thankful that it has been done that way. But now we need to move to the next level. Some of us are already doing some pilots on this area. So we need to move into action and see to it that we make this process more robust, rather than making it cumbersome for the exporters and creating another cost and administrative burden as well. So those are the 3 points I wanted to kind of highlight in the key boiling issues in the exporters world, and how the budget has touched upon those 3 areas. And I'll pause there, and obviously if there are any other questions, we can take it.
Hasita, before I move on, a quick question to you on this ECTA. We have been talking a lot about deepening the ECTA agreement. Where are we in terms of progress?
Yeah, so I think the changes that are required were in negotiation last year. In fact, the Indian negotiation team and our negotiation team came in, and with the change of government, there was some kind of a pause to it. So now glad to see that the budget talks about the appointment of Secretary to the Commerce Ministry as the chief, and kind of a team being appointed for the overall FTA. But I think it had not really moved beyond that, from what I know, to discuss into action. And here in the FTA, the critical part, at least from apparel sector perspective, is that we have the Indian FTA at the moment being very limited, with 8 million pieces of duty-free exports is what is allowed. We need to see how that can be expanded further, and obviously either increase or expand that number to a larger amount. So there progress that have been made in the last 1 year probably is not great. But I think it's important that with this initiative, now that the appointment has been done of this committee officially, for them to really move fast and bring the stakeholders together to take it to the next level.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gajendra, there were 2 SMS questions to you. One was on, are we doing enough to deepen the tax net without taxing the same people over and over again?
Exactly.
And the other question was about the SWAT.
Yes. Now, on the first point, Dinesh, I couldn't deal with it. That is on the widening the net. Now, they are trying to, under the Public Management Act, Finance Management Act, they are trying to, they are bringing in this risk-based audits, right? The risk-based audit. The risk-based unit will decide the audit if it is necessary, and so the assessors can't do. I've been always saying, Dinesh, this RAMIS was introduced in 2016. These 2 fundamental features of RAMIS was that there was no file assessor. There was no file assessor. if there was no file assessor, if there is any work to be done, there was a workstation created, and the staff also will be selected by the system, right? Who is appropriate, competent to deal with it. He will come and do the job and go away, right? That is the file system. There is no assessor being attached to the file, right? There is no assessor being attached to the file. And if you are doing an audit, assessor can't decide audit. Now, what happens if an assessor does the audit? Every year, the same guy is being audited all over again, and they are trying to get additional tax. That is your point. You know, the system will based on the risk, because all programmed, it is with information program. It will identify the files for audits, right? Identify for the file audit. Now, the administration, particularly the staff, few of them resisted this, and that was not implemented. Now, when I have spoken to at least two former Commissioner General when they were in the seat, in power, they said, Gajanan, we can implement it. If I implement it, we won't get this revenue also, the guys won't work, right? So this whole digitalization, the discretionary element, I can't say the decision making by the revenue officers can be taken away. We have to, that will be there somewhere, but the emotions attached to the file, you have to widen the net. There is about 35%, there is large scale evasion. Widen the net. How are you going to widen the net is the question. I think we have all fully exhausted the revenue collection methods. There is nothing other than the capital taxes, fortunately, that didn't come in. There is nothing more to be taxed. Other than they go back to a super gain tax for large corporates who are making thumping profits. Some of the financial institutions are on the reversals of bonds and things like that.
Okay.
That is the first one. The other one is SWAT. This is a system introduced and implemented only in Sri Lanka. No other country has an SWAT system. All of them have a refund system. And I can tell you, if a revenue administration is not ready for a refund, it is not a revenue administration. There is no revenue administration without a refund system. A taxpayer pays a file, and when he files a return with a refund, Dinesh, you get a letter. Because of a refund, we are doing an audit. So that means the objective is to cut off the refund, destroy the refund. So the SWAT were very good for so the IMF point is, I think, what is this only for Sri Lanka SWAT? They are talking of slippages and leakages, which have not been defined. What are these slippages and leakages? I don't know. There may be little, but the system worked. The real problem, the exporters had no problem, but the suppliers had a problem because they got the documentation, and some of them had refunds, because if they are supplying substantially to an exporter, and if he was not 50% and he doesn't become a registered person, he is to have refunds because part of it is exit. So now the good point in the law, with the way it is implemented, with the way it is drafted, I think even the low risk, high risk guy also, you have to refund it in 45 days. You have to refund it in 45 days, even the high risk guys. You do your risk analysis, but you have to refund everyone within 45 days. If it doesn't happen, this will collapse again.
Okay. I'll park it there for the moment and pick it up again. Professor Marambe?
Yes, thank you very much, Dinesh. Good to see you again. And thanks, Professor Vatamala, for the opportunity given to me here. In general, I also align my thoughts with many speakers who spoke, giving a lot of, brighter sides of the overall budget, especially to see that private-public partnership is in and it's given more formal positioning right now, and that's one of the best things. And I sincerely hope, representing the agriculture sector, that will definitely have a positive impact on the agriculture sector as well, especially looking at the land as well as the storage facilities, which people are striving hard continues to have access to those facilities to make sure the businesses expand as well as the productivity improvements at the end. At the post hours level, for example, get the benefit out of it. And also, Dinesh, when I look at the overall budget, what I see, the one positive thing that I see with respect to agriculture is a lot of priority being given this time for the livestock sector, animal production sector. And I see that, I mean, compared to the previous years, they are looking at more positively on how the livestock sector can be improved. Of course, implementation issues comes in, but out of all, strengthening the breeder farms, animal breeder farms is something that I give plus 10 in this case, because animal breeding has always taken a backseat in this country over the years. I mean, the breed development has not taken place effectively. So at least to get these farms built up further to facilitate this overall process is something that I welcome. And similarly, even the aquaculture production. I'm leaving fisheries out, Dinesh, from agriculture, but taking only the aquaculture component in, and I see a lot of positive inputs being given. But while saying so, there's something that puzzles me. Maybe we have to wait until the ministerial budget's being discussed separately rather than looking at the overall budget. Dinesh, when I look at all the past budget speeches, there's always a component called subsidy. Now, please don't take me, I mean, don't read me wrong. I'm not a subsidy lover, but I mean, if you look at the overall budgetary allocations, about 35 to 37 billion rupees being allocated for fertilizer subsidies or whatever the name that comes in, but I don't see such reference in this budget. But I'm also not inclined to think that government has totally removed it, but it should be somewhere. But when you look at the numbers does not tally for me in whatever the items that have been identified in Annex 3 as well. So that's something that have a lot, I mean, big question mark, several question marks in front of me, but it's fine. But then that should be a gradual conversion. That's how, see, I mean, we have to remove our farming community, safeguard them from this subsidy trap. That's no argument at all. To see that is all of a sudden is missing, I don't think it's missing, but as I told you, should be somewhere in, but that is not being spelled out at the budget speech. So apart from that, what I really want to see, once again, I'm repeating one component which I mentioned little while ago, Danish, through this public-private partnership. I think land and the storage facilities is something government should give priority when it comes to private-public partnership. If it cut across all the sectors, not considering agriculture, for example, is not going to serve the purpose. I think people have been struggling to find these facilities to be used in the best possible way. And that's my initial contribution to the question.
Just a quick question. There has always been a complaint in the private sector that the government is not incentivizing companies to strengthen the supply chain. And that's critical for the agriculture sector. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think we have to start thinking. I mean, this is something that I was in my mind to respond to another question. But anyway, we have to look at it in the agricultural, or in other words, agri-food system, starting from the input supply until we manage the waste generated from our food plate. And this continuum is important, Dinesh, because there we have to identify the critical nodal points and incentivize those to make sure agri-food systems become stronger. So that is the crucial point. That is the crucial decision-making points that the governments will have to take. But I will wait patiently to see how this ministerial budget being taken out and how it's going to be discussed at the parliament. Maybe there are a lot of new things that come in which we are not seeing in the original budget speech.
Thank you. Dr. Rajapaksa, can we move on to you?
Yes. Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. Just focus on this VAT being reduced from 60 to 30 also, please, since it will impact SMEs.
So, return to the budget is concerned, as industrialist, we don't see much any incentives to the industries as such, but overall, there are some positive points that they have taken, especially the SME sector. even government has admitted the fact that 50% of the GDP is coming from the SME sector, and they have taken a step. Now the SME sector needs government assistance. So they have amalgamated IDB in NEDA and SMET to one unit. So I think that will sort of give more strength to the SME sector with regard to the technical assistance, etc. But at the same time, we have to thank Professor for the effort that we had taken to get the credit card scheme in action now, and we are happy that it has reached 427 million, and it's planned to go to 7,000 again as a budget speech. But there's another small constraint that is coming up as regard to the VAT threshold concerned, because as Mr. Gajendran mentioned, widening tax base is part of that, but still for all, SME sector is mostly coming under 36 million. So paying VAT to SME sector on 36 million is a laborious task, because most of the SME sectors, they don't have an input VAT mechanism, because they buy local products such as curd, rice packets and all that, which doesn't have any input VAT. So therefore, this whole tax will fall onto them. That means 18 plus 2.5% works up to 20%. But people will think that it is a value-added tax and we have to claim income tax, input tax. But these small timers, they don't have a mechanism of input tax paper. So therefore, naturally, the price will definitely go up by at least by 20%. And that exercise itself is very highly laborious exercise, because somebody has to employ some qualified personnel to handle that part of it. In addition to that, the 3% SSC, which was, I don't know why it was introduced, it was a BTT that came up before VAT. But after that, BTT abolished, VAT came, then came NBT. But the whole exercise is that simplification on tax did not come through because of that. Because NBT and the SSC has a cascading effect, especially when we work on supply chain and when we have subcontractors, at every point, this 3% is now added. So therefore, this is something that discourages the small industries in that sense. Then other thing is about the tariff reduction. I see there's a reduction in tariff. The 15% are brought down to 10% when they have introduced a new tariff level of 30%. We are not, I'm unable to comment on that because we don't know what items have been fallen down to 10%. Any items that have fallen down means there's an increase in imports again. So that details have been. Then this tariff is a old system of controlling imports. The new system is through certification, which is not being considered well, and also we are not geared to handle that. If you take the electrical items, most of the electrical items that we are importing now are substandard, and there is no machinery to check the quality certification. Therefore, that has a little bit of serious effect on the local industries. So therefore, these are the few things that we have to bring in. Then VAT threshold, the understanding is, the indirect and direct tax has to be changed from 25 to 75. From 25, 75 to 40, 60. But the new VAT threshold, it further increase the indirect tax rather than direct tax. So that exercise not been accepted. So therefore, these are few things that have been brought in, because already with this new VAT threshold, most of the small companies will have to close down, especially the grocery shops. They will have to close down because they are unable to pay that, because their markup is 20-25%. 20% will go off as this new tax, so they are unable to manage. So therefore, some will have to close down, and those clientele will shift to new supermarkets again. So that's all going to happen. That's all the few comments that I have mentioned. Thank you.
Dr. Rajapaksa, you've also been talking about low-cost credit lines for the SME sector, especially this development bank that has been talked about for a while. Any thoughts around that?
No, but there's proposal in the government proposal, there are soft loans, there are low concern loans have been brought in. They are allocated funds to Ministry of Industries as well as the other one. So I think that's a good move. Only thing is how conveniently they can be given is a different question, but they have been allocated. They can attempt to allocate funds for that. So that's a good move, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Shamin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dinesh. So From a tax perspective, as mentioned by the previous speakers, no new taxes have been introduced, and moving up to the budget, that was what that was promised, and that was kept. And I think it may have been a little difficult to increase any further taxes on the already overburdened taxpayer. But just a couple of comments from my side on two aspects. One is on these discretionary taxes, and one is on the motor vehicle taxes. So, in terms of tax collection, if you just take a look at the numbers, taxes on goods, which includes your import taxes, VAT and SSCL and all that, all your indirect taxes, basically. In 2025, we've collected 3.6 billion, and 2026 is expected to be 3.7 billion. So you'll see that they are only expecting a sort of a marginal increase of 3% in 2026, which means as largely the policymaker is expecting the indirect taxes to remain the same, and it may be achieved, that 3% will be achieved with probably the inflation that is currently there. So that places a big emphasis on the fact that they're expecting the motor vehicle taxes, the contribution from the motor vehicle taxes to remain the same, or maybe only a slight dip. Now, there are schools of thought which sort of contradicts that. In 2025, the contribution by motor vehicle taxes so far has been about 587 billion in this 3.6 billion. So if you assume maybe a 30-40% reduction in the motor vehicle demand, that is a significant impact there, and that needs to be watched in terms of achieving your revenue. Of course, there are other proposals, other indirect tax proposals that are there to sort of compensate that gap, like this reduction in the VAT threshold and so on, VAT and SSCL threshold, but it remains to be seen how much that can bridge this gap. Then in terms of the national tariff policy, now we've moved to this 4-band policy, which again is not meant to be a revenue generating mechanism, but rather to align ourselves with the world trade policies and best practices. But again, as someone mentioned previously also, it means maybe overall you will not have an increase, but within the different HS codes of the goods, there will be a change. So most likely the 30% bracket will obviously fall for the motor vehicles. So the motor vehicles will most likely shift to that bracket. But then at the same time, at the moment, there is a surcharge on customs duty, which the motor vehicle industry is liable to, which is 50% of the customs duty. And that was brought in by a gazette, April 2025, which is valid till 31st January 2026. So it remains to be seen whether this will be taken off or whether all these will be added on top of that. So the other tax that again might impact the motor vehicle industry is the SSCL, and Mr. Atula Ranavila alluded to that earlier. It's been currently paid on sales, but going forward, it will be paid at the point of import. And the basis of calculations are different. And on importation, this SSCL being charged means there should be an impact to the quantum of the tax collected. So all this put in together sort of kind of gives the picture that there might be an increase to the taxes on motor vehicle. I just want to mention one thing about discretionary taxes as I brought it in. I mean, throughout the budget speech, we saw this reference to moving away from a discretionary based tax system to a rule based tax system where it concerns the concessions and exemptions. So similarly, there had been a recommendation previously from the IMF that we move away also from discretionary taxes. And your discretionary taxes are, sort of this SCL, cess, all these para tariffs, which enables the policymaker to ad hoc implement these taxes when they need additional boost in their revenue. And if we are to truly move towards that consistency in policy, transparency in policy, rule-based mechanism for policy, then we should also look at removing these discretionary taxes, which is a way of manipulating the system. And that, although was supposed to be considered, has not yet been fully addressed in the budget speech, although there is some reference to removal of para tariffs as we go along, not really properly given a timeline as to how it will be phased out. Those are my initial comments.
Okay, just a quick question. There was a question here. Somebody want to know how much will SSCL add in terms of percentage to the current vehicle import tax?
Well, I haven't actually done the numbers, but I think Mr. Atul Ranavira referred to that in his presentation, and he says it's about 1.25% increase on the base. It all depends how that formula will be calculated.
Okay. Thank you. Mahendra, can I move on to you?
Yeah, Dinesh. Yes, good evening to all of you. In fact, actually, I don't have anything much to say because all the speakers who spoke before have, commented on a lot of aspects. But I would
On the
like
manufacturing
to say,
sector, maybe you can focus on the manufacturing sector.
Yeah, but actually, I no longer represent the manufacturing sector. But actually, overall, looking at this whole exercise, what I would like to say is, I mean, as a speaker mentioned earlier, this is a fiscally oriented budget. Actually, there is no inspiration in this budget. That is my main concern because I cannot understand where the growth is going to come from. Although the government is going to government is predicting 6% growth next year, both IMF and World Bank are predicting 3 to 3.12% growth. I mean, as Talal also said earlier, to achieve 3 to 4% growth, you really don't need a government because even the private sector companies, they drive for 10, 15, 20% growth, and that automatically drives the economy. So actually what we need to do is to come up with a solid framework to achieve maybe 7 to 8% growth. Because I mean, some people think it is not possible, but I firmly believe it is not. It is possible because we are working on a very low base. The problem is actually we are talking of macroeconomic stability, but in this country, I am not really sure how we can speak about macroeconomic stability if 71% of the householders are asking for subsidies, aswasuma. And if the youth are still trying to leave this country without any hope for a proper income generation for them, I cannot understand how we can talk about macroeconomic stability, because macroeconomic stability should drive growth. I mean, that should be growth oriented. And finally, there should be inspiration for people to stay back in the country and engage in productive activities. Now, that is sadly lacking in this entire budgeting process and also the budget speech. Now, the thing is actually, as Gajay also mentioned, actually our investment in education, our investment in health, where are we going to drive this whole country? What is the direction we are taking is a question we need to ask, because revenue generation fiscal deficits alone will not drive growth really. It will not create macroeconomic stability. Finally the country will become stagnant and unsustainable if we cannot retain the youth in this country, if we can't retain the talent in this country, if the doctors are leaving, if the nurses are leaving, if the professionals are leaving for better opportunities. So what we need to do is basically we have to implement a solid economic reform agenda. In labor markets, in land, capital. Actually, sadly, there is no mention of capital market reforms, financial market reforms, labor market reforms. Nothing is there. So that is a very sad story for the country. Although the country is financially looking stable, I don't know whether this can really drive long-term growth for the country. Because now, say for example, even attracting investments, we should ask ourselves, why should foreign investors come to Sri Lanka? What are we offering? How our incentive schemes can be compared with those offered by our competing countries? I mean, there is no comparison. There is no public discussion. So, I mean, that is what is lacking in this country. So that direction needs to be given by the government, because budget is not a fiscal document anymore. It's an inspiration document. Finally, it should inspire people to work for the country, be more productive, bring more revenue for the country, so that future generations can benefit. Now, that is really lacking. I think I see, Dinesh, I have said this before. Every time a budget is presented, we all come together, scramble over one another and say growth-oriented budget, visionary budget, stable budget, and all that. But where is that vision? Where is that growth? Have we achieved that? No, we haven't achieved. Now, say for example, people below poverty line has increased tremendously, and 25% 25% increase in poverty in the country over the last 4-5 years. So that's I mean, those are the questions we need to answer. And of course, as much as we look forward to a better country, actually, I'm very cautiously optimistic that this optimism can translate to real economic growth, Dinesh.
Okay. Two quick comments on free trade arrangements and PPPs that Duminder talked about. How can the private sector leverage on that?
No, thing is actually free trade agreements. My experience has been, Dinesh, of course, the governments had been signing free trade agreements, but the implementation had been very poor. And I mean, I know that there had been unilateral violation of free trade agreements, certain clauses in free trade agreements by certain countries, which I'm not going to mention, but we have done nothing to address those issues. So what happens is we tend to end up at the receiving end. And as a result, our local manufacturers, SMEs, are suffering because we are opening our doors to imports while restricting exports. So free trade agreements are good, but then we need to evaluate what agreements are good, with whom we have to sign agreements, and more than anything else, we need to assess whether we have the capacity to go and really implement these free trade agreements. Dinesh, and then public-private partnerships are essential. We need to have laws, but for public-private partnerships to work also, there should be a solid growth framework so that the investors can comfortably come here, assuming or expecting a real growth agenda for the country. That is what is needed at this moment.
Thank you, Mahendra. Shan, can I move over to you?
Yes, Dinesh. Thank you, Professor, and the CMA for giving me this opportunity. Dinesh, as Mahendra said, that I think most of the points being covered by previous speakers, but however, it is vital for us to understand, since I am representing the manufacturing and the construction sectors. So very definitely that there are challenges which were not properly addressed. Like one of the previous speakers touched upon the areas where the labor shortage, and because we are not a country, Dinesh, ready for automation. Because if you touch automation, that's going to be a colossal amount of money that you need to invest on. So therefore, we didn't see any serious attention towards one is that retention of labor, which is not at all an option right now. Two, training the available labor. Even the vocational training sector, that we didn't see much of attention. Further, the women or female getting involved in the labor force, that we haven't got any particular attention towards, because that we can see a lot of male labor is being migrated, so that at least we have to see how best we can encourage the female labor to get into the system. Outside the budget, there are issues that, even now I'm talking about the trade. Now, construction industry is suffering a lot, and right now, one side the labor issue, other side even the SPET issue. I think it has been there for some time. People have been fighting to get that sorted out, but today it is, I think it's a question mark, big question mark, especially that exporters, the previous gentleman who spoke. And then coming to another point, that excess duty imposed on the raw material. Now, we import UPVC raw material, and there's an import excise duty, which is not imposed on the finished products. So, which is another issue that when we, unless we are a very organized exporter, if you are a small-time exporter, now while the government is talking about extending the non-traditional exports, now very definitely we have an opportunity to export non-traditional building materials, which are not in the list. So, but since we don't have this proper system laid out, so we are paying this excise duty for the raw material, while a lot of imports are coming without this excise duty. Finally, what I want to understand is now, okay, how best that we can represent, these, whatever we discuss outside these, the budget, but does it ring a bell? Can we as professionals get into this point and talk about it? Now, for an example, if you look at, I think a couple of speakers talk about the VAT and this bringing down the threshold from 60 to 36, 36 million. Actually, it is 100,000 rupees sale per day. So who are these targeted, outlets? Those are very, very small outlets. They are actually representing the less organized or unorganized sector. And then whom are they supplying? Can they have the complete the administration system to calculate this VAT system? Yes, it is actually bordering the tax net, but does it make a sense? Now, I will share one experience, Dinesh. I went to Rwanda on a weekend, and then I was there in the hotel. We of course went to the BOI there, and next day Sunday morning there is somebody coming from Inland Revenue of Rwanda, and they came and met us. I got really shocked because unknown country, some Inland Revenue guys. Whenever we say Inland Revenue, Dinesh, you know what kind of feeling that we get, right? So these Inland Revenue guys came. And then what they were trying to help us, if we have come for the investments, they had a whole heap of details to discuss with us, how best they can help us to invest in the Rwanda. So we discussed that, and then he explained that there is a software that every business that they begin in Rwanda, they get a software from the Inland Revenue. So everyone has to use that particular software so that nobody can escape or avoid taxes. So that there are very, very good lessons, even for countries like Rwanda, no need to go to whole developed world. So why not we get into that kind of setup to take this country forward? Thanks.
Sean, in general, the construction industry has recovered from the crisis that you all were in 22. This now the government in their budget proposals are talking about convening and recommencing some of the stalled construction projects. Is the industry geared and ready for this, or?
I think if you ask this question from a contractor's point of view, they have burned their fingers in the past. The very similar approach came. The government pushed them to invest on the machinery and various other aspects, and then finally ended up they were becoming bankrupt, and they closed down the operations. On top of that, most of the engineers have left the country. Now, see, 3 million trained workers gone out of the country. Now, if you are to go and suddenly grow in the construction industry, where do you find labor? I recently went to one of these the apartment projects. They have got Indian, Nepal, and the Bangladesh labor. So how can you afford this? Your cost is going up. Now you are all this construction industry. Earlier for the apartment business, they didn't have VAT. Now they have to pay VAT. The cost of units have gone up incredibly. So this is something that is, not encouraging the investors in this sector. So that government need to look at how best they can encourage, because just topping up on the, existing business and earning revenue through, various taxation does not help you unless you grow the pie. How do you grow the pie is the question that all these economists and the fiscal people have to look at.
Thank you, Sean. Chandana, can I move on to you?
Yeah, Dinesh, so first of all, thanks for having me, especially Professor Lakshman, for including me here. So I'm also echoing a little bit of construction industry sentiments. You mentioned that we have recovered. Actually, when the crisis hit, construction industry contracted by 50%, more than 50%. The closest, proxy to understand the construction activities, cement consumption. Cement consumption prior to the crisis was around 6 to 7 million tons. When the crisis hit, it went down to 3 to 3.5 million tons. Now, last 2 years, it has recovered around, now we are at 4.5 to 5 million tons by the end of this year. So we still have a long way to go. So actually, construction industry growth so far, thanks to the private sector. And this could be pent-up demand. All the stall projects of the private people, they may have started, and some of the activities in the southern belt due to tourism probably had helped the construction industry. There was no major government projects. And even the 2025 budget, whatever the allocations were not spent, the previous speaker mentioned that only 35% they have spent. So we are in a state of recovery. We are not yet out of the woods. There are many structural issues in the industry. I think Shan briefly mentioned. This industry used to have about 1 million, employees, but I'm not sure whether now we have even half of, the many engineers, project managers, supervisors, skilled labor migrated. And many of the unskilled labor went back to their villages, probably integrated with their, agriculture or fisheries. I'm not sure whether they'll come back. So we have ambitious, projects and massive 392 billion allocated in the budget for 2026. But how are we going to execute them? So there is no major focus or program in the budget or by the government on the construction industry to solve these structural issues. For example, during the crisis, many contractors were not paid for several months and years, and they piled up debts and interest at 30–40%. And finally, government paid these dues, but then they're still in debt, And smaller contractors probably went bankrupt, many. And now with this VAT, which is the threshold lowering to 36 million, is going to have a double whammy for these smaller people, contractors. Either they have to jack up the prices or they won't be able to operate. And the other thing is construction cost, skyrocketed. And of course, since, August 2022, many construction material mainly have come down by about 40–50%, which is good, thanks to the stable exchange rate and lower interest rate and these things. But mere, projects, in the budget, I do not know whether, and particularly, can we believe and trust the execution capacity and capability of the, public officials and the government? This is a big question mark.
Another quick question, Kanchana, has the industry been able to refinance the industry?
You are asking me or Kanchana?
Yeah, Chandana, to you.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think, as I said, there will be major requirements for funding, financing some of the private, the contractors. I don't think they have the capacity and the, for financing suddenly, even working capital. I'm not sure whether even the banking system is still lending, enough to the construction industry, maybe for other areas, but not yet for the construction industry. So this can be also a question mark, yes.
Okay. Have you reached out to the government with a proposal?
I think we were expecting some concessionary, loans and maybe lower interest rates, at least for the smaller, contractors. And even to stimulate the housing market, some housing loans or maybe a tax allowance or holiday reduction from the income tax for the first house or second house, But these proposals are, kind of made, but we haven't seen this in the budget proposal.
Thank you, Chandana. Kanchana, can I move on to you finally?
Yeah, Dinesh, thanks. Thank you, Professor, for inviting us. Of course, very briefly on the electricity sector and the energy sector, government has again reiterated their reform agenda, and so they have that's ambitious agenda on reforms for the electricity sector. So they have started forming the companies and they have offered the VRS, and they are also talking about Energy Transition Act, which will encompass petroleum sector as well. So that's a good sign, and we expect efficiency gains and bit more transparency in the sector.
So they have also offered a VRS for the CB employees, and I heard that around 10% might retire voluntarily. So that's positive and negative as well, because if the good skilled people leave, that's an issue. But government is sticking to it, and they have formed the companies as well. So that's a good sign for the energy sector. So, and in terms of demand, of course, it has bounced back, from the crisis period. We see strong growth in the demand. So it's tied with the economic growth as well. So that's a good sign. But one concern is now 50% of the energy used for electricity generation is still imported. And the pricing of that is not very transparent, especially the petroleum products. So that's a concern we have. And we have asked CEB to come up with proper fuel supply agreements so that the pricing is transparent for the customers. Of course, as per the structural benchmarks, there's a requirement to revise tariffs every quarter, so which has sort of increased the volatility. So that's the concern we have. And of course, we are capable of setting prices for 6 months or maybe 1 year. So that we have asked the government to look at it. We think that policy, so that's a concern. So regarding the energy prices, of course, it has become stable, especially the electricity prices. And of course, we are trying to keep it at that level in the near future as well. So that price stability is a requirement for the industries and other commercial activities. So that's where we are, just to start the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. A quick comment from you on the solar and wind potential?
Yes, now the new act is envisaging open access. So that should in general encourage private sector investment into generation. But then now the grid is facing a little bit of stability issues and absorption capacity concerns at the moment. And so CB has little late in bringing in these batteries that is required to stabilize the grid. So that investment has to happen faster so that more small scale solar and wind can be absorbed. But for large scale projects, of course, they are coming up with storage itself. So they can grow because they are cheaper. They are the cheapest source at the moment. So the next new additions in generation will come from those sources.
Thank you, Kanchan. Before I hand over to Professor Vatawala to close the session, I have a final question. Maybe Hasita and Charmaine can respond to this question. So much talk about FDI and incentives. It should be rule-based, project-based, etc., etc. Sri Lanka, for the last so many years, has been able only to mobilize about $1 billion a year maximum, right? While Vietnam gets 300 billion in a year. What do we need to change the game? Hasita, you are in that industry, maybe you can respond to it.
Yeah. So I think incentives, generally, when you talk about FDIs, we talk about attracting FDIs through tax and other related, especially incentives. So that's one way of doing it, but that's not the only way of doing it. I think the most critical part would be how competitive we are in our cost structure to fight the rest of the world. So if we are competitive, then obviously there will be investments attracted. And in order to do that, one of the things that, like I said before, will be critical to have this right free trade agreement so that we have duty-free access to at least some of the key markets, or if not duty-free, at least at some form of parity in the duty structures where we are not at a disadvantage. So that's a very important number one point I would highlight. The second one will be our ability to drive productivity up through investments into automation, digital, and other related areas where the workforce in particular responding to the change that is needed in the global industry. Now that's something that has to happen more aggressively, especially when you look at the way China has transformed itself in the manufacturing industry, despite higher tariff, despite higher costs. they've still kept the cost per unit down because they have kept the productivity up, and that is driven largely by the automation and the digitization initiative. So that's that will also come as a top key factor that will make us competitive as a country. And thirdly, I would say the business environment, including the ease of doing business, setting up to tax regime, to various other aspects, more not the tax incentive part, but at least there is no tax harassment, right? That there is clarity on what you have to pay, and then probably there when you go and pay, there are no undue questions and undue assessments that are coming in. So that type of work environment, business environment to be created. So those can attract investments into a country to us, and in all those areas, I think we have work to do for sure. Given that we have not got any special incentives, tax or any other special incentives, at least working on these factors more progressively is important to attract the right type of investment. Otherwise, there will be some targeted, like now mining is a topic that's being spoken about today from BOI side. So maybe that type of FDI piece might come in to a very targeted area. But if you look at some of the other targeted areas, including the port city, I think there's a lot of work to do, because there's lot of potential. But if we can create that environment that make a business viable and globally competitive, then FDIs will come in much faster than what we are currently seeing.
Thank you, Asita. Charmaine, a quick comment from you.
Yeah, so as Asita mentioned, tax incentives are just one way to go, and that's just the icing on the cake. And anyway, when you look at the global environment now, we are moving away from the incentives with Pillar 2 and global minimum tax coming in. So it's not about the incentives or the concessions that we need to attract FDI. I would think it is mostly on the ease of doing business. Enabling a business-friendly environment in our country is what is going to, bump up that FDI, which I know we've spoken about in several budgets, national single window and so on, but that implementation hasn't still happened. And, if you look at our index, our position in the ease of doing business index, it's still not that great. So I would say the key factor to attract FDIs is not tax concessions, but ease of doing business and enabling business environment together with the provision of skilled labor, which we need to look at.
Thank you, Charmaine, and over to Professor Vattawala.
Thank you, Dinesh. Gajendra, I think there are some questions sent, maybe not the long ones, at least the short ones, if you can just read it out.
One of the question is on this abolition of SVAT and how is the refund system is going to work because of the previous fraud and other things. And other question is linked to this, the implementation of or reduction of the VAT and SSCL threshold. How it's going to affect the SMEs and the micro businesses? If any panelist can answer for those.
I can give a little bit of a background on how when the SVAT goes off, how it really works, starting to work. So from 1st October to 30th, to the first month, if you take the first month of the 31st October ending, we have to submit the tax return, VAT return by end of the month of November. So from there, 45 days is when the refund comes. That is January 15th, like I said, the first refund has to come. So during that period, obviously, the cash flows get stuck from a business perspective, which was not happening before because we are into export and we are supposed to get a refund for the input VAT. So that will be January 15th is the first one. So there, I think the critical conversation we've been having with the authorities is to ensure that at least initially to provide that refund. If there are disputes or issues, you first refund and then you can claim it back from the next payments if the disputes are not resolved in a time-bound manner. Because otherwise, what we've seen historically is that there will be a dispute and then that dispute keeps dragging on, and as a result, all the refunds get stuck. And if that happens, obviously the businesses can't operate, especially with the tight cash flows that most of the export industries going through with this current global price pressure and the tariff-related implications that are coming in. So that's something that we have represented to the government, like I said before, not only to the government, but also the IMF and some of the other bodies, which hopefully will keep a close eye to ensure that the right governance process sets in to bring the refunds on time.
Thank you. And any responses on the reduction of threshold limit registration for the VAT and SSCL?
Yeah, I'll mention that most of the small industries, small boutiques, definitely most of them will have to close down because they are unable to raise the prices to that level because there's an increase of all products by 20% with VAT and SSC. So all the restaurants and small dealers, boutiques, grocery shops will have to close down because they don't have a margin of 20% to restrain their prices because some of the items, articles are price marked and the price control. So they are unable to increase. So therefore, they will have to move away and most of them, most of the small boutiques will close down. Tax base will not be increased because the original understanding was to increase the indirect tax base. But these again, the direct tax base. Now these again increase in the indirect tax base. So therefore, it's a wrong decision. So it will be a disaster for the SME sector. That's what I got to say. Thank you.
I think
this-
Atula might have some comments. Atula?
Yeah. Now, anyway, now this SChat cancellation, I think as Mr. Gajendran also said, it is a unique system introduced only in Sri Lanka. I think our people couldn't convince the IMF the importance of SWAT, right? Now, the main thing what has happened, this is an income source to the government. Now, the liquidity, the cash flow improvement to the government by cancelling the SWAT, government is first collecting money and repaying generally after 3 months. Now, October, if you'll take October average as October 15th, you'll be getting the refund by, the commitment is by 15th of January. That means always these exporters, they have to spend invest money for 3 months, that the VAT component, amount equivalent to the VAT component, always they have to keep investing that money continuously, not for 1 month. Now, October, January, then November, February. Therefore, that money, the interest cost on that is an additional cost to them. Whether we can pass on this additional cost to the prospective buyers in overseas, that is the problem. Whether we will be able to continue in the overseas market, whether we will be competitive enough in the overseas market. Therefore, this cancellation of SWAT, of course, it has badly affected to our industries. At the same time, with relate to this cancellation, the reduction of VAT threshold and the SSCL threshold also will badly affect to the SME sectors. Therefore, I don't think it is a wise decision. How much they are going to collect with this? That is the biggest thing. Now, by reducing this, it's an additional burden to the IRD of administration of these people. And how much they are planning for. It is not so material. And the other thing, now when they introduce, now they are saying low risk, middle risk, and high risk. Nobody knows the criteria of selecting this risk level. Nobody knows. Now, suppose my business is in the middle risk. For me to get it upgraded to the low risk category, I should know, I have a right to know the criteria. Up to now, our tax authorities failed to announce the criteria. Maybe that even they may not be knowing that. Right? That may be the reason. Anyway, nobody knows that. First of all, the revenue authorities should build up the trust with the taxpayers. Taxpayers are their clients. Therefore, they should build up the trust with the taxpayers. For that, one thing, they should have that type of a mentality. How to give the mentality? Definitely, there should be educational programs to educate them to handle their clients as well as to improve their technical knowledge. I think that is the most important thing. Thank you.
And will this reduction of the threshold will lead to more cash transaction bring back to the society?
Yeah, a lot of corruptions will be there thereafter.
And moving to Mr. Shan for a quick question, what is your take on the media, this implication of these budget proposals?
Gajendra, I haven't come across anything on media so far. In fact, I had a chat with our other guys as well, but we didn't find any serious impact on media at the moment. I think we need to get into more details, rather than the speech from President.
Thank you. And any of the panelists want to give any final remarks?
I'll just add one point before we go. I think while we talk about the medium to long-term targets, which is a good thing, I think it's also important to focus on the short term and see some of these proposals that have been brought in. How do we implement them and kind of use them in the short term as well? Because there is a lot of improvements, especially from export perspective. With the challenges that are currently being in front of us, we need to implement. For example, if you look at the SME sector, there is 80 billion rupees, I think, have been allocated for concessionary funding, etc. So if we can move some of those funding fast into the right place, especially into R&D, automation, digital type of investments, because most of the time what happens is that this is allocated from the budget, but when you go to take a loan from the bank, it's very difficult to get the loan, especially for a small player. So it's important to see how that disbursement can happen in a more meaningful and a time-bound way to make an impact to come out of the current challenges. Same way, the proposal on the enhanced capital allowances is about, I think, Jamin, we spoke about it yesterday also, that it's about a more of expansion related enhanced capital allowances. But today's expansions may not necessarily be into buildings and machines and brick and mortar, but it might be to improve the capacities by improving the efficiency and productivity, increase the capacities by improving the efficiency and productivity. So investments might be into automations and some of the other intangible things like digital investments. So those aspects also need to be considered and to see whether the enhanced capital allowances can be available for such investments as well. So these will help, at least in the short run, to get a boost for the SME sector in particular to come out stronger to counter some of the price challenges that are coming in the export industry.
Gajendra, if I can ask a question from Professor Buddhimarambe, what impact does this budget have on the paddy farmer and rice prices? Is there any impact, or how do you suggest? Because sometimes these prices are going up and then a lot of problems are created. Anything that you can comment on this?
Yeah, Professor Vatawala, one thing I mentioned at the very beginning also, certain crucial components which should have been there, as I told you, for example, the fertilizer subsidy, if at all it's to be given, those kind of information is missing in the main budget line, because that was always been spilled out by the previous budget speeches, which I found a bit strange. So in that context, that's what I think. It's always good to wait and see, Professor Vatawala, when the ministerial budget lines are being debated. That will be the best option for us to guess. Looking at this budget proposal, what is being presented to us and in front of us, it will be very difficult to come out and give a conclusion. One thing for sure, efforts being made to develop or build up storage capacities for onions, potato, and maize. So that seems a plus point, right? But how far it will move forward, at what level the storage capacity is being built up, that's something that we have to look into in great detail. Just having a statement alone, put us in a difficult task. But while saying so, what you said right now with respect to price fluctuations and so on, that is mainly because of poor planning and poor understanding of the market structure or a deliberate manipulation. Those are the two things that can take place with respect to the price structures that we see here. That's with respect to especially
Can productivity be a solution?
yeah, so that's the point I was about to come at this stage. Yes, I mean productivity and total production. Productivity alone will not matter anything unless the production is also there overall. That is the only chance to move forward, which I don't see here, Professor Bhattawala. That's why, I mean, the overall productivity packages and production improvement programs, it's very difficult to see light through this, what is being presented at the Parliament last Friday. So that's a worry, but I'm pretty sure when it comes to ministries' budget lines, we'll have more details on this.
I think on this productivity, Shan, are you there? Can you comment on it? Shan, since you are in the manufacturing area, actually there are also Chandana is also there.
Professor, I did not get the question right. Come again,
No,
please.
on the manufacturing area, how do you think that the productivity can really help and support? One thing is your profitability, bringing the cost down, and also on the pricing area.
Very definitely, the productivity has a major impact on one is on the bottom line, other one is on the reduction of cost. But fortunately for us right now, there is a global reduction in raw material prices so that we can survive at the moment. And on top of that, borrowing rates are down, so the cost to some extent is low. But then if you look at the overheads today, overheads are rising, and Sri Lankan manufacturing organizations are accounting around 18 to 22% of overheads. That is quite high if you are to get into the global market, and this is very challenging for us. So we need to bring down the cost. How we bring down the cost without having sufficient top line or the volumes? So that is why I previously also said that what are the things that we are doing to encourage non-traditional exports, and therefore the government, I haven't seen much of a serious detailed, I mean, as another previous one of the speakers said that we have to wait and see whether there's anything else that we are planning to implement to support the local manufacturers to get into the global market.
Thank you,
If I
Shan.
may add,
Chandana?
Professor Chandana here. Professor, I think one of the areas we are actually affected, the adoption of the technology, like, or any incentives to manufacturing, companies to encourage investments, while the capital allowance is given for expansion. I'm not sure whether this is also applicable for the new technology, introduction to get the productivity and enhance the manufacturing facilities, which will drive down the cost. So there is no such incentive or focus from the government in the budget, towards this.
Hasita, you have some comments on this, on productivity. I think you all are doing extremely well on the exports.
Yeah, but we're doing a lot, but still it's not enough because every day the price gets challenged given the current global competitiveness, especially due to the tariff environment. But I think the critical area, there are two parts to it. One is how we can invest into automation and digital initiatives that can drive the productivity up, obviously take some of the human errors out and also get the efficiencies up. The second part of it is how the humans adopt to these new ways of working, including some of the basics as well as onto these automations and digital working environments, and how they respond. How do we do that change management successfully? Because how much you invest into machines, nothing will happen, no productivity gain will come unless we onboard the humans and manage that change in a productive way. So that second part is very important, because what we have found is that while we make those investments into productivity improvements through automations and related efficient machines and all these equipment, what takes more time is actually to get the people to change way of working and adopt to the new working environment that is needed. So that requires education, that requires change management, and that requires a lot of how should I say, change, embracing the change, which is taking time and not easy. So that's where that dynamic workforce come into play and give different countries a better position. For example, China, Vietnam, like I said before, have been well ahead of the race in that front, because people have really adopted fast. And one of the things that one can always argue is that most of the time people will adopt when your gun is on your head or you're pushed to the wall. When you have no choice, then you're forced to adopt. Whereas how much at this time, when you have time in hand, always people take that time to change. And China in particular changed very fast during the COVID time, because the gun was on their head, their costs were going up, they had a lot of geopolitical challenges, higher tariffs, so they had no choice but to change fast, otherwise the whole industry to collapse. And they did it quite well. So I think it's important that before we have the gun on the head, before that we have time, but we have to move fast.
Thanks. Shamin, can you talk about, there's mention about the technology costs, claiming it. What is the sort of method and any incentive?
So on the claiming of the enhanced capital allowances, what the budget speech says is that it's bringing down the current threshold of 3 million down to $250,000. So currently, as it is, this the claiming of the enhanced capital allowances is restricted to investment in fixed assets. It does not talk about intangible property or R&D or productivity, as Hasita said. I mean, that's the basic reading we get from the budget speech, but I don't know, maybe once the actual amendments do come in, whether they will enhance the eligibility criteria. But as of now, it's restricted to just fixed assets. So we'll have to wait and see how that is worded.
Rajendra, we can then move on.
Yeah, okay, now I would like to invite Vice President of the CMA Sri Lanka, Mr. Henaka Bandara, to deliver the experts sum up and to do the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rajan. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be very brief. From the overall point of view, speakers and panelists highlighted positive and negative impact on budget proposal. The proposals on digitalization, export-led growth, rural development, social welfare, infrastructure development, and policy consistency were considered as positive proposals. For example, the budget demonstrates a clear focus on achieving export-led growth, encouraging investment, and maintaining macroeconomic stability, which is expected to strengthen external sector and boost investor confidence. However, limited focus on real sector development, increased tax burden, dependence on IMF, and slow growth will have negative impact. For example, the reliance on IMF targets and funding may limit the government's flexibility to implement its own economic policies and achieve sustainable economic growth. At the same time, new taxes and levies can increase the tax burden on certain sectors and individuals, which may negatively impact economic growth and consumer spending. I believe there should be a concrete plan for the development of the real sector. It is a separate exercise, and the present budget does not address that issue sufficiently. Even Mr. Gajendran also highlighted a couple of points on this area. With those remarks, on behalf of CMA, I would like to thank Mr. Ulangamua and Dr. Kapila Senanayake for explaining how the government is planning to meet the economic challenges, the necessity to have sound macro fundamentals, and benefits the society will get over a period with the implementation of budget proposal. However, what is important is careful implementation and monitoring to drive the economic growth and improve living standards of the people. Let me also thank all other distinguished speakers, Mr. Atula Ranavira, Mr. N.R. Gajendran, Mr. Talal, for explaining tax proposals, implications on business and society, and impact on IMF requirement. I also would like to thank Mr. Dinesh Veerakkodi, the moderator, for the wonderful job done, and all panelists. Let me name all of them. Mr. Asita, Senior Professor Buddhi Bharabe, Dr. Rajapaksa, Mr. Mahendra, Ms. Tilakaratne, Mr. Irasekara, Dr. Chandanayan, Mr. Sirivardhana, for the expertise provided to make all participants aware of the impact on budget proposals and providing clarifications to the extent possible within the time allocated to them. Let me also thank our President, Professor Lakshmana Vatavala, Mr. Povendra, our Council member, and all participants, and CMA team for all the arrangements made to have a successful webinar on Budget 2026. Great to have all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Hope to see you all again. Thank you. Good evening to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I must thank Mr. Gajendra for moderating and helping us out, and all our speakers. Hasita, I'm sure that you all have taken off your valuable time. Exports are very critical to our country, so I'm sure what you said were very good. And all our other speakers, I think Mr. Atula Ranavira, who's been helping us a great deal together with all the others. So there are a lot of things that we may have to take from this webinar, and I think Mr. Gajendra is the chairman of the Taxation Committee of CMA. So I'm sure that he will be able to get the support of everyone, and maybe if necessary to submit any suggestions that have come up. One was, of course, the SWAT matter. I think that we may have to see that the implementation is done very well, so that it will not affect. I think that's the best that we can do, but I'm sure that will affect the small people as well as the large producers of garments and other export items. So thank you very much. And we do hope that the 2026 budget, although IMF is behind us, I think they are really giving us a good management lesson as to how we should look after our affairs. And we must say that we have no other option, as Hasita mentioned, that we have to follow this and then try to overcome the difficulties that we have and then go into better times. So thank you and very much, and all the very best to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.